Namaste and welcome everyone to the 2019 Jyotish Transit Summit. It's such a blessing and honor to have you here. I'm here with an amazing group of astrologers, and we are going to discuss all of the significant 2019 astrological transits which are going to be coming up. And we're going to be discussing them in detail from many different angles. First, I would like to just start out with some introductions to this divine and beloved panel that we have here with us today. So it is my great pleasure I am able to introduce Pandit Sharma C.S. Samavedula, joining us from California. Pandit Ji is the founder of the Vedic Yagya Center and is a sixth-generation Samaveda Pandit. Pandit, after receiving his master's in Vedic studies, became a professor of Samaveda and served as a priest for many years before opening the Yagya Center in 2002. The Vedic Yagya Center now has centers in India and the United States, in which a wide variety of traditional Vedic yagyas are offered, including Graha Shanti yagyas, or Vedic planetary-based rituals. Pandit may be reached through his website, Vedic.com, VYDIC.com. Welcome, Pandit Samavedulaji. Namaste. It's a blessing to have you here.
Thank you. Namaste.
I'm also deeply grateful to introduce Barry Rosen, joining us from Fairfield, Iowa. Barry has been deeply involved in research and practicing Vedic astrology for over 30 years and is founder of the organization Applied Vedic Astrology. Barry has some very profound research in the area of financial astrology and published numerous related articles in leading journals. Barry's research extends far and wide, though, into every aspect and area of Vedic astrology, whether it's incorporating the Vargas divisional charts, the nodes, transits, or innovating with the use of outer planets and astrolocality. Barry always has a way of bringing positivity, psychological aspects, and spiritual evolution to the interpretation of any transit or chart. Barry, a renowned author, recently released many new books, including the book titled Finding Your Blind Spots Using Astrology, which I absolutely love. Barry can be reached via his website, appliedvedicastrology.com. Welcome, Barry. Namaste. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very honored to be here.
It is also with great enthusiasm I am able to introduce Somya Devi, joining us from Marin County, California. Somya was certified in astrology through the American Academy of Vedic Art and Science. Somya is also a certified Ayurvedic wellness counselor from the Kerala Ayurveda Academy. Somya is a great scholar of Jyotish and has studied with many amazing teachers of Vedic science, including Stephen Heiberger, Camilla Sutton, and Dr. Vasant Lad. Somya has developed a beautiful and prolific blog where she continuously and consistently shares updates on the current transits, cycles of the moon, and always shines in service and devotion to her Guru Amma. Somya may be reached at somyadevi.com. Grateful to have you here. Welcome, Somya. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, Ksanati.
So it's great to have you all here. And if Sam joins us, I will get notified, and hopefully that will be happening. But we can definitely save his topics for him for when he does arrive. But I would like to start things off today. I would like to start things off by discussing what astrological transits are, how they affect us, focusing on the microcosm, our individual self, and the macrocosm, the greater world at large. And I can't wait to hear what the other astrologers on the panel have to say about how transits affect us. I mean, I was discussing with my wife, and when I told her what I was feeling, she said, so they pretty much affect everything. And I said, yes. So as I move into this presentation and just discuss some of the areas of how transits affect us on the internal level and on the external level. So, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. By the way, the recording of this summit later can be found at the following YouTube channel. Now, my favorite aspect of transits is to discuss how they affect us spiritually, is to discuss how they affect us psychologically. Now, my favorite text to use for understanding transits, the text which I like to reference a lot, is Gochar Paladipika. And I have by Dr. U.S. Pulapanri, Sundara Varadachari. And this is a text which is excellent, called The Torch of Transit. And it is just an excellent text to be used when looking at transits. Now, astrological transits, as we know them, have the strongest influence over the following aspects of the chart: the Lagna Rashi, the Ascendant, also the Chandra Rashi, which is the moon sign, the moon nakshatra, the moon position, and also Graha returns, when planets return in the transit to the original position that they are in your chart. Now, those aren't the only areas which transits influence, but those are some of the strongest areas which transits influence. Those are when the transits will have the strongest effect on us. But astrological aspects and transits still have influence over other areas of the chart, such as the Surya Rashi, the sun sign and the sun nakshatra, also the natal grahas and their house position. So if Jupiter's in the second house in Taurus and there's a planet transiting Taurus, that's going to affect your Jupiter. That's going to affect your second house. Also, Varga Rashi, Navamsha, and other divisional chart positions. Also, the positions of the Graha in the different divisional charts of Vargas are also affected by the transits. And also natal nakshatra positions. Whatever positions your nakshatras are in the birth chart, when planets transits those nakshatras, they're going to have significant impact. Now, certain types of transits have a stronger influence or effect than other transits. Basically, some transits are just more intense, more overwhelming, sometimes in a favorable way, sometimes in a favorable way. Some of the strongest astrological transits, we know eclipses, lunar eclipses, solar eclipses. Whether it's a partial eclipse or a full eclipse, eclipses have a very strong effect on our individual chart, on our microcosmic level. Also, planetary wars or conjunctions, tight planetary conjunctions, planets that are within 5 degrees of each other. Planetary returns, as we mentioned, when a planet returns to the original position that it is in your birth chart. For example, Mars in Pisces in your birth chart, when Mars goes into the Pisces, this is Mars returning to its natural position. Also, when the moon is new and when the moon is full, these have strong astrological impact. And also, generally speaking, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu have a stronger influence or effect. And this is more of a philosophical question because these are considered malefic forces. So they might consider to have a stronger effect because they disturb our pleasure of life sometimes. The Saturn transits, the Saturn return, and when Saturn transits the Chandra Lagna, the Sati Sati, these are considered some of the biggest transits in an individual's lifetime. There are also many other types of astrological transits that also have influence or effect, such as when the sun is transiting, or even any of the planets, any of the graha is transiting. A Vargadama graha, a planet that is the same position in our D1, in our D9, maybe in our other Vargas. When the planet is in that position, that's Vargadama in our chart, that has signification. Also, if the planet which is transiting is in Vargadama. So that means the transiting position is similar through the divisional charts. This has a stronger effect as well. Vakri Graha, retrograde planets, planets which are retrograde or moving, seem to be moving backwards, also have a strong influence. And there's also the aspects. The sun and the moon have opposite aspects, and other planets like Jupiter and Mars and Saturn have alternative aspects. These aspects also influence the transit as well. So these are all the microcosmic layers, how the individual transit will affect our chart alone. But there's also the macrocosm, that which is beyond our individual, that which is beyond ourself. And I believe that the astrological transit has an effect on all of these areas, including government, weather, natural disasters, society, consciousness, war and peace, violence, disease, such as outbreaks and other epidemics, politics, technology, innovation, religion, the economic or financial condition of a place or country or continent. So yes, it affects us all on an individual level, but it's affecting our world on a macrocosmic level. All of these transits are not just affecting us, right? In Jyotish, in astrology, we want to know, how is this affecting me? But there's also mundane astrology and other forms of astrology which are saying this is the transit, but how is it affecting society? How is it affecting our world? This is an example of the current transit, just a little glimpse of a North Indian and South Indian version of right around this moment. I had 11:15, so maybe it's a little bit off, but it's pretty close. And this is an example of the Aries Lagna of the transit. You have Rahu and Cancer in the 4th house here, aspected by Ketu, Mercury, and Sun in the 10th house here. And one thing you'll see as we're analyzing transits is it's not black and white. Nothing is good or bad. There are always positive aspects of a transit, no matter how malefic it could be considered. And there's always challenges, no matter how positive a transit can be considered. So this is just a glimpse into the current transit, which I wanted to share, so we could get a glimpse into seeing there's a Venus and Jupiter planetary war, which Somya might be touching on as she discussing some Venus conjunctions later. Now, this position of Venus being in conjunction with the planetary war in Scorpio, that has some profound significations, you know, for our spiritual evolution, but also for experience here on the physical world, in the wealth world, in the romantic world, because of Venus. Venus and Jupiter are both gurus, but there's many ancient tales of Venus and Jupiter having an assorted relationship. Of course, we know that the moon went to Venus to ask the advice as far as the sleeping with Tara, Brihaspati's wife. So there is this sordid tale. So this is just an example of the current transit which is going on right now, which I wanted to share. And now I would like to open up this kind of question to the rest of the panel. And I would like to ask, are there anyone else who would like to comment on how transits affect us? I would love to hear from some other members of the panel.
Thank you. Yeah, I have some thoughts. I like to see the planets kind of as pulling our puppet strings, you know, and our emotions and our psychology. And I think if we understand the transits, which are affecting us all the time, then we allow us to kind of cut the puppet string so we can be free. So I think the true value of studying transits is, you know, it does move towards moksha, because usually we kind of blame ourselves. You know, we feel angry, we do something angry, and, you know, maybe Mars is very beat up by Ketu that week, and, you know, we're beating ourselves up for just being very angry. But then, you know, we understand what's going on in the astrology, and then it's kind of a jnana technique where we can step back and say, oh, it's Mars and Ketu, it's not me. You know, the puppets were kind of pulling my strings. And so I think when we understand what's going on in the transits, we can pull back. I mean, this week, for example, I got hit by Ketu conjunct Mercury, and I was kind of depressed and kind of knew it would be over by the end of the week, and I kind of knew what was going on. You know, I still was feeling the depression, but I at least said, okay, it could be over soon. God, this is Ketu and Mercury. I've got to kind of just let go of this. So it's good. And I think transits also teach us about natal astrology. I'm teaching a transit class that just started, and people are still welcome to join it. And, you know, sometimes you don't have certain signatures in your chart. For example, we also had Sun conjunct Ketu last week, and it was, and, you know, it puts people on a short fuse. And I was just, you know, I'm caretaking my wife, and I'm like, you know, I'm snapping every minute, and that's not like me. But in transit, I suddenly got to experience that. So next time I see Saturn Ketu, closely conjunct in natal charting and remember, okay, you got to watch out for that short fuse because you're going to be in trouble. So I think transits, transits are everything.
Thank you, Barry, so much for sharing that. That totally, I know exactly what you mean. I feel like it affects every layer of, from the most basic psychological level to, the really the bigger picture. And I totally resonate with everything that you shared. Somya, or Pundit, would you like to share about how transits affect us a bit?
Yeah. Well, transits always, it's a transition towards to our enlightenment, though. That is the way I do see, because most of the transitions, whenever we, planetary transitions we go through, every transition we learn something new. And that helps us to plan ahead. And that is, in the Jyotish also, that is the reason Jyotisha is very much need, not as a cushion for the person, like anybody is using a Jyotish, but Jyotish is like a Jyoti and Isha. I always say that Isha is the Lord towards to the God, Jyoti is the light. So it shows the light towards to our evaluation, like our main, to reach our destiny with the transits. So every transit has their own impact, but if you do your proper sadhana, you go through your own spiritual discipline, definitely you can overcome with the transitions, any transits.
Mm-hmm. That is inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing.
But because many people think, okay, this transition is coming, how I'm going to be handling it. But before, instead of scared with those transitions, welcome those transitions and just learn with, when you're traveling in a train or flight, you will be meeting many people, maybe not kind of your people, but you travel with everyone same way. So same thing, all these transitions come. Some transitions will do good to us. Sometimes it's not going to do good to us. But you need to just handle the things. That is the way. There is a mantra called in the Shanti mantra. Bhadram karne bhishrunuyama deva bhadram pasche makshabhrya jatra sthirairangai stuštubagum sastanobhi. The mantra itself is saying, Bhadram means protect. Bhadram karne, protect my ears, protect my eyes, protect myself. And sthirai rangaihi tuštubagum sastanobhi means protect me and give me the strength to deal things in my life, in whatever the transitions comes, transits comes. To that kind of a strength you will get with your spiritual discipline when you practice in your life. So doing this Jyotish, reading, learning, everything is a discipline of spirituality.
Yes, it's not the hand that you're dealt, but how you play it. And I think that embracing these astrological transits that we receive as much as possible is at the very core a key to the happy life, or it can be very key to the happy life. Somya Ji, would you like to share something on how the transits will affect us?
Sure, just a little. And I really appreciate everything that all three of you said. That's a great way to fill it in. And so just a couple things to add, reflecting on that. Noticing it's important to remember that the moon is transiting the entire zodiac each month. So whatever the transits are that are occurring, if we have Saturn and Ketu together in this coming year, which we'll talk about, the moon is going to be passing them and joining them for a couple of days each month. The moon is going to be with Mars for a few days each month, and with Rahu and with Ketu and with Jupiter. And so on a micro level especially, I think we can really notice the waves of our mood changing as the moon transits and goes through each sign and joins with each other planet. And then, of course, on a macro level, I think we really notice a certain tone in society as we experience the transits of the outer planets. We'll talk about everything going on this year, but one recent thing that really sticks out to me is, a couple of years ago, 2016, where we had Jupiter and Rahu together in Leo for at least most of the summer, if not most of the year. And that's when we were experiencing this intense polarized election season, both in the US and in Europe. Leo with government, Jupiter with ideas, Rahu with intensity and radicalism. And we experienced this on a macro level. So just noticing for me, the macro of the transits is where we can really see sort of a trend across society, something that we're experiencing together. And on a micro level, aside from the transits of the moon, it's like you pointed out, there's so many different areas where we can notice what's going on in our lives, depending on how the transits are affecting and relating with our natal chart. Definitely, especially during eclipses, I notice people always coming with things that are arising based on where the nodes are hitting their charts at that current time.
Amazing. That's totally on point. And thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
So I just want to move on to our next question, but I hope everyone at home understands now how great of an impact on an individual as well as governmental, society, and planetary level these transits are going to be affecting us. Now, the next question is specifically for Pundit Samavedula ji. So I just want to present this question to you, sir.
Yes.
Would you please discuss the 2019 transit of Rahu and Ketu going into Gemini and Sagittarius and all of the implicated and relevant nakshatras?
Yes. Thank you. So about the nakshatras and Rahu and Ketu transition, it's coming up from March 7th. Some areas, it's March 7th, basically. It's starting on March 7th. So nakshatras are, there are Mrigashira, 3rd and 4th padas, and Ardra, all 4 padas, Punarvasu, 1, 2, 3, and Gemini. And Mula and Purvashadha, all 4 padas, and Mula, all 4 padas, and Purvashadha, 1, Sagittarius. So planets Rahu and Saturn and Rahu and Ketu. Basically, Rahu Ketus are shadow planets where they don't have their own entity, but at the same time, they both are not 2 different entities. They both are in one entity only. So whenever, I will be talking, these transitions at the same time, I will be giving some remedial measures also how to handle these transitions. So planet Rahu, these transitions are happening in I think it's sometime it's 2 a.m. or something around that timing. It's Rahu, March 7th, 2019, as right now is in 4th and 10th, and it will go back to 3rd and 9th house, which is Taurus and Gemini. And many people, there are here 2 different controversies, not controversies, there are 2 ways of saying that is Rahu is for Rahu and Ketu is the year also 2019 year. If you look at it in numerology way, if you break it down into single digits, it comes to 3, and number 3 is the Jupiter. And so Rahu and Ketu will be in the 4th. Rahu will be in the 4th and 10th house, or Ketu will be in the 10th as of now, but it will move retrograde 3rd and 9th. And whenever you see the Rahu's effect, always you have a Ketu also affecting us, and in a different way. But sometimes Rahu can give you extraordinary results too. But Ketu is the Moksha Karaka, so Ketu can, it goes together, but you have to balance with the with your sadhana basically. And how you look at it is, if 2019, if 2 plus 1 plus 9 is equal to 12, and 1 plus 2 is 3. So that is the way you can look at it. Is that this year is a year of Jupiter, 2019. And 2019 is not going to be a very successful for everyone, but to come out of this, the best thing is to ground yourself, ground like a centering to ourselves and bring it down. And as much as you do, the best method for here is doing to come out of these transitions. Well, of course, you cannot come out of the transitions. Transitions will go through. Only thing is you protect yourself. In Sanskrit, there is a saying, Heyam dukkham anagatam, avert the danger before it arises. So how you can avert the danger is by doing your own sadhana and doing Rahu. Many people say, okay, Rahu and Ketu transition, so remedy is for Rahu and Ketu. Direct remedy can be done. Yes, but it's not going to affect direct remedy. You have to do, to help the Rahu, you need to do the remedy of Mercury. And to help the Ketu, you need to do the remedy of or Jupiter. Sorry, for Rahu is Jupiter and Ketu is Mercury. That is the way you need to do the remedies to get the effect and to protect ourselves from the negative effect from these transitions. So Rahu remedy is for both Rahu and Ketu, this transition in 2019. You do the best what you can with Jupiter and Mercury. And basically, if you know, in the Puranas also, they says Jupiter is the Devaguru, Bruhaspati, and Buddha is the knowledge, Buddhi Bhutam Trilokesham. So which is he is the knowledge base, Buddha, Mercury. So you have the knowledge and you have the teacher. So you have to have both in life. And the teacher teaches the knowledge and bring that knowledge into yourself and learn a lot of new things and bring yourself into grounded energy. So that is the best way to deal with this Ketu and Rahu transition. And it's not going to be so easy because Jupiter is a gaseous planet, as you all know, and Rahu is also Vayu. So you will have a lot of issues with air pollutions, or tornadoes can be also, or a lot of natural calamities. And people don't try to understand each other. They will try to, that is what is going right now in the, if you look at an overall picture in the world, especially in US, in the leaders, the kings doesn't understand the normal people problems, and they go on their ego because Guru is the ego, and they think they are the best. So this kind of a problem, transit is starting in March 7th, but you can see all the effects from now on itself. Even from the beginning of this year, you can see the effect, how the Rahu and Ketu, because sometimes Rahu Ketu's energies you won't see because it's Rahu likes to hide things. So, definitely this kind of an energy is not going to be doing good unless you put yourself into right remedial measures. The best remedy is for the Rahu is Rahu's Rudra Rupa is Rudra. Rudra means the anger form is Rahu, is a Rudra, and the best way of control that is by worshipping Shiva. And that Shiva, which is the form of Rudra, not the meditative Shiva, the form of Rudra. Rudra means the anger form of Rudra, you can call, and that is the way to control, because And the best chant for listening also is the Shiva Tandava Stotra. I don't know how many of you heard about Shiva Tandava. Is a very, very famous Shiva Tandava Stotra. Is in Shiva does that. Tandava means dance form in the when he's in the Rudra Rupa form of Rudra. Jatakataha Sambrama Brahmannilimpa Nirjari Vilola Vichi Vallari Virajamana Murdhani Dhagat 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 Jwalalla Pattapavage Kishora Chandra Shekhare Rati Pratikshanam Mama. So this kind of a chants also will help to reduce the energy of Rahu, because and Rahu can be reduced. You get the benefit from Durga also, as Rahu's Adhidevata is Durga. That also can be handled well. And another thing is, you will have a lot of not only in one area or one individual this transition will affect. It will affect all over the world. No matter where you take, there will have the problems in the governments, problems in the public, problems in the elections. All these things can be happen. And this is all just, the characterization of Rahu and Ketu. So to get so is it something we have to deal with this? Yes, you have to deal with this, but to get a protection, as much as group meditations can help create the more sattvic energy to fight back with Rahu and Ketu transitions and get the benefit out of it. And as I mentioned, Rudra is to protect, get the protection from Rahu. Is daily Shiva puja, daily Shiva mantra sadhana, or daily Rudrabhishek also will be very helpful for that. But basically, you need to bring your energy into your center point, and Rahu always wants to travel within you. If you try to extrovert, it's not going to do good, especially to control the Rahu negative energy, especially because Rahu can do very good also, but to control the Rahu energy, when everything happens good, that is the time you try to do, you will make mistakes in life, and that is the way the Rahu will bring you down. And because Saturn is watching too, and Rahu and Ketu will have a Saturn effect. Like for example, if you're doing a Saturn and Rahu transition and you're doing a remedy for that, you just leave it Saturn aside, it's not going to work. So you have to work with Saturn, Rahu and Ketu also. Then only you can easily come out of this kind of transitions. And there are different mantras, which I don't know whether I will have a time or not on this. To talk
2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are mantras for Rahu, which I can share it to you later on in the email, so you can send it to everyone. But there are different mantras for the mantra for Guru is Om Jram Jrim Jram Saha Gurave Namaha, which is the Bija mantra, which everybody can do. And basically, this Rahu and Ketu transition, best method is to doing strengthen Jupiter and Mercury. That is the best way. Directly doing Rahu remedies are not going to be helpful that much. Doing the remedies for Mercury and Jupiter will helpful. So say.
Now, that was a very comprehensive analysis on our transition of Rahu and Ketu. I noticed that Sam is joining us, so I just want to welcome Sam and give him a brief introduction. Sam is, it is with deep respect I am able to introduce Sam Sadasiva Geppi, joining us from San Diego, California. Sam is the founder of the American Academy of Vedic Art and Science, which offers level 1 to 3 certification programs in Vedic astrology. Sam is also known for his amazing books, Yoga and Vedic Astrology, and the Ascendants, 108 planets of Vedic astrology. Also, Sadasiva recently released his own forecast on significant 2019 transits, which can be found through at 2019vedicastrology.com. And Sam can be reached personally through his website, vedicartandscience.com. Welcome, Sadasiva ji.
Hello, folks. Sorry, I'm a little late. I actually got the time mixed up. I thought it was 9. So, great to see you, Pandit Samavedula, Somya, and Barry. Nice to see you. Sorry to interrupt everything with the introduction.
Hey, it's all good, and I'm just so happy we're here together right now. Just to kind of catch you up, Sam, I basically talked about what transits were on the microcosmic level, how they affect us, and then macrocosmic, the government, society, the world at large. We all shared a little bit about that. And then we're discussing the shift of Rahu and Ketu as they move into their new signs of Gemini and Sagittarius. And Pundit just gave a very comprehensive analysis of the transit along with some remedies. And I was just going to open it up to the rest of the panel if anyone would like to share on the transit of Rahu and Ketu, which is coming up in 2019.
Thank you. Gemini, governed by Mercury, is a very kind of business sign. And Rahu does really well with Gemini. It has a lot of dignity there. And Rahu governs technology. And so I think Rahu and Gemini is going to really kind of create a lot of business expansion and technological expansion. And that's kind of a good thing. In fact, it can also create technological obsession. Anything with Rahu is obsession. So if anything, Rahu and Gemini will probably come up with a cell phone that can walk your dog and cook your meals. That's the direction we seem to be going. But expect kind of more kind of extreme technological advancement with Rahu and Gemini. So that's kind of the good side of it. Ketu in Sagittarius has a lot of dignity also. Many people think it's exalted there. The opposites, the other side of strong nodes is that, we almost don't want nodes to be too strong. You put Mars in Capricorn for a Gemini ascendant, it causes really kind of major problems for people. You don't really want strong malefics. And last time we had Ketu in Sagittarius, we had 911 because we had a lot of fanaticism. So the problem with Ketu in Sagittarius is it can create deep religious fanaticism, such kind of religious fervor, and that creates more terrorism. So particularly when we have Saturn conjunct Ketu and Mars opposing Ketu in June, you have to kind of worry about that kind of energy with fanaticism and terrorism. The bright to me, going into 2020 when Jupiter will kind of help the nodes. We'll have the brighter side of the transit will come out. But this year, we're kind of plagued by Saturn aspecting the nodes, and we'll have Mars conjunct the nodes, and aspecting the nodes. So it's going to be more problematic. But the bright side is, I think, good business creativity, good spirituality can be developed, but you have to watch out for fanaticism. You have to kind of channel the fanaticism that Ketu and Sag will bring into some passion, like helping the world, or maybe to your guru, to spiritual devotion. That's where it will can really come out in a positive way. You can easily blow people away with trying to convert them, and I've seen that happen with Saturn, with Ketu and Sagittarius. So something to watch there. That's kind of all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barry. I definitely can see some of those trends already starting to bubble. And I think that as this transition happens, especially the obsession with technology, that's really at the forefront of society right now. And I think that's going to come to a culminating effect during this transition, which means two things. One, people will be more obsessed with technology, but on the more healing, positive side of it, I also see it as this opportunity for us to finally look at it, look at our relationship with technology. Is it excessive? Would someone else like to touch on the transition of the nodes as well? Somya, Sam? Sam?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I track the nodes. I mean, obviously, I've been doing annual reports for about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years or more. And I tracked when usually Rahu is the leading edge. I mean, because that's the active end of the node. Ketu is the thing that's being sort of buried while Rahu is being developed. So, for instance, 2000, it was like January 2016, Rahu went into Leo, and we saw that whole kind of campaign season with the Hillary, Trump, with Rahu and Leo. That was very much like the patriarchy, the government. And during that like year and a half, we had a sort of concentration of nationalism. You had Brexit, you had Trump getting elected, you had a real rise of that kind of patriarchal, nationalistic sort of thing. I said last year when it was September 2017, when Rahu went into Cancer, that it would be like a reassertion of like the divine feminine, female kind of installation, like a reassertion of that. Right after that, you had the Me Too movement just exploded out of nowhere when Rahu went into Cancer, and also Jupiter went into Libra, those two things. And you're seeing even the culmination of Rahu going through Cancer was this recent election that we had in US, all these like ethnic women, blue wave kind of pushing a lot of the patriarchy aside, which is what I said when Rahu went into Cancer. So I like to look back at I always look at the sort of progression from, the last couple transits of the nodes, especially with Rahu on the leading edge. So moving from Rahu in Cancer to Rahu in Gemini, what Gemini is more than anything, I think, is really the truth teller. It's like, I don't care what the truth is. The data is what matters. The facts are what matter. I don't care if it brings down the whole house of cards crashing to the ground. The truth is going to be spoken. It's going to show up, and we're going to see it, and we're going to look at it with neutrality, hopefully. We're going to see what the truth is, and then have to use our discrimination to recognize it, speak it, and sort of live in that. And I think we've been kind of living in a sort of fact-free bubble the last several years with the whole rise of fake news and this whole kind of swirl of confusion as if facts don't matter anymore. And I think we're going to see some really hard facts hit us in the face. I'm sort of talking publicly at this point, because we share the world and we can see these effects in the world, but of course in our own life as well, how we've been living in a sort of fact-free zone. And so the reassertion of truth and facts and, and then having to, show up and then respond as a result. So we can kind of see the way certain, trends are happening in the world right now with politics. It's always an interesting mirror because we can all see it. And politics, not just in one country, but in the world. And so Gemini is also very much about the citizens and the sort of egalitarian and the leveling of things. So, where the elites and those in power are going to have to really reckon with the voices of the citizenry on some level. So on a personal level, of course, that's all our own thing as well. We're going to have to let go of some of our own sacred cows and those things that we've been believing in blindly, which is Ketu going through Sagittarius, letting go of those blind beliefs. Because again, Ketu and Sagittarius, anything in Sagittarius can lead to fundamentalism. And so Ketu is rejecting something while Rahu is developing something. So I see it as this rise of intellect and intelligence and the sort of scrutiny of just our false beliefs and our false hopes, which is Ketu going through Sagittarius.
Thank you, Sam. That's very enlightening and resonant. Somya Ji, would you like to touch on the transition of Rahu and Ketu coming up?
Yes, just a quick thing to add. I totally appreciate everything that everyone has said. And I do also see that technological potential. There have been a lot of advances in the past when Rahu is here. And just the quick thing to look at is that it takes about 18 years for Rahu and Ketu to transit. So about 18 years ago, 2001 was the last time we had this placement of the nodes. And so both on the macro and the micro, we can look at that and say, well, was there a significant shift in my life 18 years ago, 36 years ago, and, you know, like 1983, and look at those points in time when we're thinking about this transit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Excellent. The one thing I wanted to say about this upcoming transit is I think when Rahu and Ketu go into their own nakshatras, it's something special that's happening in the universe. And so you'll have Ketu in Mula, Rahu in Ardra, and you'll be having these very powerful nodes in very strong positions for them. And whenever I think of Ketu, I think of somewhere where we might have some past lifetime knowledge or wisdom from a karmic perspective. And so we have some karmic energy in that area, but we still have to finish what we started. It's, in other words, we have this wisdom, we have this knowledge, but it's a culminating energy with Ketu, finishing what we started. So as that goes into Sagittarius, some of the energy when I think of Sagittarius on the more macrocosmic level is our moral and our ethical fortitude, not just on an individual level. Yes, can we live our lives in alignment with our moral and ethical potential? But how about how immoral and unethical, just like our general world is and our general society? And this is indicative of the Kali Yuga. But as we go into this shift of Ketu moving into Sagittarius, especially as it gets into Mula Nakshatra, something that Sam said I can concur with, which is really getting to the truth, really getting to the root. But I think of this purification, the purification of our immoral parts of ourselves, the purification of the unethical parts of ourselves. I think that when Ketu falls into Mula Nakshatra, there will be a lot of potential for that. Now, Rahu's like this unfulfilled energy. Rahu's this craving that even if we give it one bite, it wants another second bite. You give a mouse a cookie and it wants a glass of milk. This is certainly how Rahu acts. And so when that's in Gemini, this could be a great time for innovation. This could be a great time for technology, but it can also be too extreme in that sense. In other words, I think there could be certain innovations or changes that happen in technology, but it's arguable whether those are what's best for humanity in general. In other words, there's this great innovation like the iPhone, for example, that we've all come to use in our lives. But is that iPhone beneficial for our spiritual evolution as a humanity? Very far from it. So I think that as we have to be careful with the innovations and technologies to come, with the Ketu and Sagittarius, which is aspecting it, being like, is this technology supportive for my spiritual growth? Is this technology allow me to be moral and ethical? You know, the internet is this great place with all this knowledge and information, and it's also a place where you can commit illegal things. So this is also, I think, some of the potential which is going to be activated, the positive side of the moral and ethical potential for us to align to it, but also the temptation that the technology which might be coming might not be supporting our spiritual growth. Now, I'd like to move on to the next question. Panditji, please.
That is the reason what I was saying is to bring ourselves into ground energy. When we bring in ourselves into ground energy, so we can easily come out of this, the Heidi situation of Rahu and this technological wave which is going to be coming, which we are all predicting. It will help if you bring our energy into grounded level. It will easy to come out of this transition and easy to handle the transition for everyone.
Mm-hmm. 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 I think excellent. So yeah, it's a big shift, and I think whenever with the nodes we see this spectrum of positive energy and potential, and also challenges which come up. And I think as we go through all of these transits, we talk about the bright side and the rainy side as well. So Barry G, the next question I have is specifically for you. That would be, would you discuss Saturn, Shani's 2019 transit, specifically focusing on retrograde periods and Saturn's conjunction with the South Node Ketu and any relevant nakshatras as well?
Thank you. Yeah, Saturn, I have Saturn at Makaraka, so Saturn and I are really good friends. So Saturn goes retrograde on April 29. And the interesting thing that people may or may not know is that, you know, Saturn transits are most intense the last 10 degrees of the sign. So between 20 degrees and 30 degrees Sagittarius, the real kind of fervor and energy of Saturn comes to roost. And, you know, we noticed this also when, you know, we had the last 10 degrees of Saturn in Scorpio. It was just kind of more of a hellish time for people because the intensity is greater. So we have, you know, retrograde Saturn is actually also more intense. So obviously this very intense period starting in at the end of April until September, when Saturn's retrograde, and it's retrograde in the last 10 degrees of the sign, is particularly kind of difficult. Now, on top of it, obviously, we have Ketu transiting into Sagittarius to join Saturn, and probably close from about March 24th, they're getting pretty close to each other. Within, I usually like to look at between 3 to 5 degrees as having a strong influence, and so we have this huge influence of Saturn Ketu, which I'll talk about in a minute. But we also have Pluto there. I can't ignore the outer planets. You know, Dennis Harness has done a lot of research. You know, there are palm leaves in the Madras museums that predict the outer planets and describe them. And you know, Pluto is like Yama. It's very kind of transformational. You know, I don't like to use the word death because death is more about transformation. But you know, so we're moving towards the Saturn-Pluto conjunction also, which is January, I think January 12th or so, January 20th, 2020. So Saturn is going to be very close to Pluto also within 3 or 4 degrees as part of this whole time. So it's kind of, what does this all mean? I had to kind of outline what it does. So we have to kind of break it down. Saturn, Saturn obviously is teaching us to be more responsible, to work hard, and that's sadisat is difficult for younger people. People go through sadisat later in life usually don't have as much a problem with it because they are responsible and they've learned the lessons of Saturn. But for younger people, Saturn is particularly difficult because if you want to have fun all the time and you don't want to be responsible and work, Saturn retrograde always kind of is going to teach us to be more responsible, to work hard, and to grin and bear it. And it's never fun. We'd rather have Venus, and go out and party, but Saturn, being responsible is part of life. So the Saturn retrograde usually kind of like beckons us to kind of work harder, to be more responsible. With Ketu, Saturn Ketu conjunctions can kind of create kind of pessimism and depression even. And so one of the big energies up this year that you have to be aware of, if you're feeling depressed or pessimistic, you have to kind of remember, okay, it's Saturn and Ketu. It's going to be there. They're going to be connected strongly between March and November, and I've got to just move through it. And like Pantaji said, if we do our sadhana, our meditation, if we're disciplined about our meditation and our yoga, then most of the, these dark influences kind of blow away. I mean, I can wake up in the morning and feel, I have a debilitated moon. I can feel depressed. And by the time I do my sadhana, I'm just totally energized. So the trick to get through Saturn Ketu is to be very disciplined about sadhana. And that's what Saturn wants you to do. If you do your meditation regularly and you do your yoga, then, you can like transcend most of it. But what happens is people start feeling depressed or gloomy and they don't want to do their sadhana. And then they feel worse. So you have to kind of remember to be very disciplined with Saturn. Otherwise, gloom and despair can come up with this. The other side of Saturn Ketu is that it can point you, can lead. Ketu always kind of brings up regrets of the past. So whenever we get Saturn Saturn is also kind of, sometimes often connected with suffering from the past also. So when you get those two up together, you can really get a strong influence of God. I should have done that. I've messed up my whole life. I haven't been doing that. So you have to kind of remember not to beat yourself up with Saturn Ketu, because otherwise you get, beating yourself up doesn't do anything. You've got to actually just take action, move forward, and change things. And that's what Saturn Ketu wants you to do. You don't want to be guilty and regret the past. Otherwise you get bogged down and you don't move forward. So when that energy is really strong, you have to do your sadhana, and you have to kind of be aware that, okay, to move out of the regret of the past. Otherwise, you're going to be you're going to have a problem. You can also, sometimes Saturn Ketu can kind of bring up, problems around beliefs and kind of wanting to kind of change everything and to change societal beliefs. And so, one of the big things that will come up, particularly in Sagittarius, which is a sign about beliefs, is that we're going to have people kind of questioning everything that they believe. And I think Sam was alluding to this before too, where you start kind of like questioning what you're seeing on TV. Particularly, we've had this, the U.S. is a Sag company, Gemini is the media. We have this huge opposition with Saturn, Pluto, and Gemini opposing the media. And we're going to have some culmination of that. I think by 2020, when Jupiter finally goes into Sagittarius, we'll finally have kind of maybe people demanding truth in media. At the moment, we're still kind of, it's still Rahu's, is going to spin more problems in Gemini with the media. But I think when Jupiter gets into Sag, people will demand truth in media finally. And they will walk away from the smoke and mirrors that Rahu's been creating. But that's kind of part of what's going on there. But Pluto is also there, and Pluto wants to kind of create kind of a catharsis. And one of the things, Pluto transits are very long. Pluto went into Sagittarius in 2006, and it's kind of completing its journey in Sagittarius next year. It's going to be in 2020. I think it's a little bit in Sagittarius. It's a little bit in Capricorn. But Pluto is forcing us to kind of complete transformation in terms of whatever house is going on. So if Sagittarius is your second house, which is the house of family and finances, then Pluto is kind of forcing you to complete remodeling and transformation of your relationship with your family and your finances. And when Saturn and Ketu and Pluto are together, it's just kind of adding more kind of energy to kind of complete this transformation. So I think whatever's been going on the last 12 years with Saturn and with Pluto, there's kind of a culmination of this Pluto transit, in that Saturn and Ketu are going to kind of edge it on to kind of complete the work that you haven't done in that particular house. So if you're Gemini rising, the seventh house is about relationship. There's a relationship you haven't hung on to. You've been hanging on in the wrong way. And so finally, the Saturn Ketu Pluto thing is going to force kind of deep transformation in that area. So whatever house is involved, I have a 300-page book coming out this week, and on which is a guide to the 2019 transits. And I have a whole guide to Saturn Ketu Pluto by transit. Because it is individual for everybody else, and on a collective level, it's there are general things that we can say about it. If we look at Saturn Ketu in history, last time we saw it was in October 2007, and one of the things that was really up that month is that we had a lot of California wildfires, and it was actually, I think in some ways they were more serious than what we've had in the last couple of years. In fact, 100,000 people were homeless in some of the forest fires. And actually, interesting enough, in October 1871, which is also the last time we had Saturn and Ketu together, we had the Great Chicago Fire, which destroyed the whole city. But that wasn't the only fire that broke out. There were actually 4 other fires in the Midwest that devastated cities, and over 2,500 people were killed during those fires. So Saturn Ketu can bring up these kind of fires, and so we have to be concerned about that and make sure that you have escape routes. I was just talking to a client the other day, and she was very concerned that she moved and relocated to a city where she could easily get out of Dodge, because if, some places, you can just get stuck on the I-5 and just can't move. So, when everybody's trying to, astrology should not be used to promote fear, and I'm not kind of like doing that here. But to me, it's interesting to study mundane astrology and the history, and to see that Saturn Ketu has tended to cause fires in the past. It also tends to cause hurricanes and tornadoes. There's a big, in November, in 1871 and in 2007, we had big cyclones hitting Bangladesh and Hawaii that were causing mass destruction. So these kind of transits, the positive side of natural disasters is that it forces the rest of us to be compassionate. When 9/11 happened, we reached out our pocketbooks. We started helping people in New York, and so when one part of humanity suffers, it forces the rest of humanity to be more compassionate. So we have to kind of reach into our pocketbook. Go to areas that are affected by tragedy. Help people if you can. I don't know if my friends have done that during 9/11. They, nobody was thinking of the poor firemen, and they went out and they made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and cookies, and they brought them to the firemen, at the 9/11 site so they could eat something. It's just sometimes you have to kind of think, well, what can I do to help? And so we're all in this together. So not to get worried and things like that, but Saturn and Ketu can, on a mundane level, dig up kind of difficult situations. One more thing, with Saturn and Pluto, Saturn, they're very kind of opposing forces, and we're going to be dealing with that conjunction over the next year. Pluto wants to explode and transform and unleash energy, and when it doesn't, when it has problems, it gets violent and disruptive to kind of create major changes. Saturn kind of represses and restricts, and so it's kind of the opposing energy. And so as we're, you could see that we have the whole US is kind of polarized at the moment. And if there's some event that kind of catalyzes something, you can see how a lot of tensions are going to go forth. And we're looking, we look at Europe right now with the Yellow Jacket syndrome, huge, the populace ruled by Saturn and democracy rising up against the aristocracy because they're not being listened to. So we have to think that this year is going to be a year of much more of that happening. And a lot of people were predicting a couple of years ago with the eclipses, but I think if it's going to happen, it's going to happen this year. And then Jupiter will come to the rescue in November when Jupiter goes into Sagittarius. And again, not to get into fear mode, but on a personal level, you've got to take care of being responsible with Saturn. You've got to transform these issues of the last 12 years that you haven't completed. And you've got to manage your depression or pessimism. And with sadhana, otherwise, it's going to be kind of a bleak year. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. And I've got 6 or 7 articles on all of this in my almanac this year. If anybody wants to pick that up, it's available on my website.
Thank you so much, Barry. That was extremely enlightening. And, all of these planets are Graha and Rahu, Ketu, they're karmic planets. But when you think of Saturn, Ketu, and Pluto all joining together, this is such a time of karmic transformation, karmic churning, that's more concentrated than it would be otherwise. Someone else like to count?
I want to say one more thing, by the way,
Yeah.
just real quickly. The last time we had Saturn, Ketu, and Pluto together in Sagittarius was in 1517, and that was the year that Martin Luther wrote the Reformation, and that transformed the Catholic Church and moved the world toward Protestantism. Now, that document was written in 1517, but the impact of it took years to kind of have an impact. So we have to think that some huge major event like that is going to happen, and certainly with the scandals in the Vatican around pedophilia and things like that, another round of Saturn, Ketu, Pluto is going to kind of force them to kind of come to the surface and deal with that in a more specific way. But I think some rebellion is going to happen in terms of people kind of finding new belief structures. So it's very powerful. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in. Thank you.
100%. And we can see how that relates as well with what we discussed about the nodes. And there's this real on the macrocosmic level, this possible for change in our consciousness. Someone else like to comment on Saturn's transit upcoming through 2019? Sadasiva?
Yeah, I want to reflect. It's very similar to what I just said about Rahu going through Gemini as well, but the opposite. Even Barry was even just mentioning things like with the Catholic Church, or again those things that we worship. With Ketu going through Sagittarius, they're going to come under immense scrutiny, and a lot of people worship at the altar of this religious party or that one, this political figure or that one. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm seeing it more with Rahu going through Gemini and showing us and getting more information and data, like the lid getting blown off, let's say like with the priest scandals, more and more of that. And, the underbelly of what happens in the Catholic Church, as an example, on a social level, can be shown by having the two malefics in Sagittarius blowing up all of our preconceived ideas and naive belief systems. And this is where Rahu in Gemini is like, so now that we see the truth, now that we have this new information, what do we do about it? Do we cling to our old belief systems, which are getting blown up by Saturn Ketu? And because that's also very dangerous, because people don't let go of their power and their beliefs very easily. Once their symbols of martyrdom get destroyed, they can get violent. They say it's bad enough to have like a demagogue or a figure like that. Worse than that is a martyr, where they get persecuted or prosecuted or removed from office or whatever it is. Because you make them a martyr, then they become a big cause, and then it's very dangerous. So we could see that all around the world with the proletariat rebelling against the aristocracy, to put it in European terms. So I totally concur with that. If you look at it from the Saturn Ketu end of the node and or the Rahu in Gemini end of the node, they work in partnership, in tandem.
100%. Thank you for enlightening us on those aspects as well. Would someone else like to comment on Saturn Ketu or Saturn's transition into 2019? Somya?
Thank you. I just want to add a couple of things. I think Barry pointed out that Saturn and Ketu are going to be within 4 to 5 degrees for a while. And what I noticed about this transit, and this is using the mean node, Saturn and Ketu are going to be within 1 degree of each other for over 5 months. Because just as Saturn is stationing and going retrograde, they become within that 1 degree. And so then Ketu, who's always moving back from our perspective, and then Saturn being in retrograde motion, slowly picking up speed, going back and forth over Ketu, they're going to be so tight for that long that all of these things that Barry and Sam have pointed out could be even more intensely amplified this year because of the closeness of their conjunction. It's very rare that would be for so long. And then the other thing to just point out to people, perhaps that they might notice where this transit is affecting them in their lives on the microcosm level. Barry pointed out we're already feeling this transit starting this year. And I think one reason for that is that the solar eclipse on January 5th, even though most of us couldn't see that, but we felt the effects of it. And although the nodes were still in Cancer Capricorn, that eclipse happened in Sagittarius. So I noticed it in my personal life, the area of my life that is shown by Sagittarius, that's where I felt the effects of the eclipse. So you may look at that in your life. And I think I also put that in one of my articles, depending what house that is for you, Sagittarius is where you're really going to be feeling these effects this year.
Thank you, Somya. Thank you. This is very comprehensive as far as all the different angles we're talking about this transit. Panditji, anything you'd like to share?
No, it's already been talked everything. But only thing is one, you know, all this transits, especially Saturn and Ketu. Saturn is basically is a karma yogi. So as much as you do your karma yoga, means because sometimes Rahu can make you more enough lazy, so you can distract from your routine of your spiritual practices. So as much as you do karma yoga, Saturn Ketu transitions you can handle pretty well. But again, many people before, when we see the transitions, we're scared instead of thinking of how to handle it. So if you find the right solution and how to handle properly, easily you can handle. But I know some people already might having these effects of Saturn, Saturn and Ketu transitions and Rahu. So all this will come, as I told you, this year of 2019 is a Jupiter year. So, use your knowledge, use your wisdom, and get the help of it.
Thank you, Panditji. And before moving on, I just wanted to make one comment concerning planetary relationship with Ketu and Saturn, because commonly you hear, okay, Rahu and Ketu are both friends with Saturn. But here's the interesting thing. Rahu is like to or akin to Saturn, and Ketu is like to or akin to Mars. So, and Saturn and Mars do not operate well together. They often create difficulties together. So you can see some of that dynamic of Saturn and Mars in a different manifestation kind of happening through Saturn and Ketu. When Saturn and Rahu are working together, there are these changes that are the person is forced to go through, but they don't have any choice in the matter. But sometimes with Ketu and Saturn, I think it can cause more stress or more difficulty on the individual, because they have the illusion or the Maya that the choice is theirs to make, that I either have to choose this side of it or I have to choose the other side of it. So Ketu might be progressing and advancing in certain ways of the life, depending on Sagittarius in the natal chart, depending on Ketu's position in the natal chart. It could be pushing this type of active momentum. And then Saturn being a lasso, wrapping it around and slowing everything down. So in many ways, as Saturn and Ketu conjunction, we can feel like life is at a standstill. No matter how much action and energy and effort we put in, we're not getting what we want out of it, which is connected to our desires, which is an aspect of Rahu. So there is this period of having to be patient, not getting what you want, things not happening on your own timeline. And this is an aspect of moksha. Both of these planets are minimalizing, so it's encouraging moksha, a minimalization of the things in our life that we no longer need, that no longer support us anymore. So that's just a little I wanted to share about Saturn and Ketu. Now, there's another topic I would like to move into, but does anyone want to comment on anything with Saturn's condition in 2019 before we move on?
I think sometimes, and I need to write a section in my almanac, we have to kind of be proactive in this year. It seems like the transits are a little bit easier, between now and the middle of March. And then, then obviously you get all this kind of blocks and inaction and frustration, like you said, with Saturn and Mars, much of the year is kind of peaking into June when Mars opposes Saturn and Ketu and stuff like that. And then, it doesn't kind of lift until, middle October and November. So, you kind of want to work extra hard in getting a lot of stuff done at the beginning of the year and be patient in the middle of the year, and then realize that, maybe you'll complete it at the end of the year. But, that particularly for like Capricorns, because Saturn is having a 12th house transit and it's a kind of a frustrating time anyway. Everything, expenditures, delays and stuff come up. So, just, make a little bit more headway before Saturn hits, 20 degrees, before it goes retrograde, before it hits Ketu and Pluto.
Excellent. Thank you, Barry. Thank you. So the next question I have is for Sam Sadasivaji. I was wondering if you could please discuss the effect of our upcoming July 2nd eclipse in Gemini and the implicated nakshatra.
Absolutely. I can share my screen? Yeah. Okay, let me do here. All right, so I did just bring this up so people can see. It is a free webinar, 2019 VedicAstrology.com. You can go there and register. You can get this overview. These are the 10 sort of things that I broke out. And Somya mentioned a very important part of the last transit of Saturn, and this is Saturn Ketu. I actually break it down to being conjunct within 2 degrees. Very important, very unusual to have Saturn and Ketu conjunct within 2 degrees for like 5.5, 6 months. That's going to be really important in that one. And then we move into this June 8th to July 2nd. You know, Barry was just talking also about the sort of middle of the year. You know, the nodes change March 23rd, and then we get the Saturn Ketu start to dance around for months. Then we get Mars Rahu, which I'm going to show you in the chart in a second. And then we get the solar eclipse in Ardra Nakshatra. So this middle of the year is really kind of loaded, but I wanted to just show you can get that at this website there if you go. It's all free. So this is the chart of the solar eclipse, and actually let me just jump over to the software. Okay, so you can see that now. And so this is the chart. What are we at here? Oh, that's not it. Okay. What do we got here? Wait a minute. Oh yeah, this is a week before. This is like right before. This is the solar eclipse, right? I mean, solar eclipse right here. So this is July 2nd, 2019. And obviously, as you can see, we have this solar eclipse in Gemini. And, you know, as was said before, I'll just sort of reiterate some of this. Rahu in Gemini is actually quite a, you know, dignified place for it. I happen to think it's the most conducive for figuring out what it is that Rahu is trying to figure out and bring to us, because Rahu is trying to literally kind of figure out the world, and it's kind of frantic with trying to understand why things are happening. Of course, it's devouring a lot of things, and it feels a kind of insatiable appetite. When it's in Gemini or in air signs, but I would say especially Gemini, it's this appetite for knowledge and for information and wanting to comprehend things. So I see it as being quite a positive, shift, particularly because these dual signs are also where things shift a lot. The the Sagittarius Gemini axis is where there's probably more shifting than anything else, because it's these two masculine dual signs. And again, Rahu is very akin to Gemini, because Gemini also just wants to figure things out and see them clearly without a lot of charge around belief and whatnot. And it's very similar to Rahu. So in general, I see the transit itself, as I said earlier, about reestablishing and reasserting a certain amount of intelligence and seeing the truth of what it is and how that tends to blow things apart. The last time we had this transit, it might have been mentioned, but I'll mention it again, is when we had 9/11. And this is the chart of 9/11. And you see we had Moon Rahu was also joined at that time, and they were in Ardra. The buildings hit when the moon was in Mrigashira, and then the buildings came down when the moon went into Ardra. So there's, the moon was also in Ardra, and this Mrigashira to Ardra shift also happened when we had the tsunami in 2004. The earthquake happened when the moon was in Mrigashira, and then all the flood came when the moon went into Ardra. Same way with Hurricane Katrina. We had the hurricane, sort of churning when the moon was in Mrigashira. Then it hit land, and all the devastation happened when the moon went into Ardra. So this transition from the moon, when the moon goes from Mrigashira to Ardra, is always one that has the potential for a lot of destruction. And again, I don't look at it as necessarily the negative kind of thing, but of course, airplanes hitting buildings and things coming down. It wasn't just a destruction of an actual structure, but of, without getting too weird about it, like the innocence that we were somehow isolated. When that happened, we were connected to a lot of implications and whatnot, not to get too political, but it changed a lot of things. So it was the destruction of an old way of doing things. Now, even culturally and globally, terrorism and living with it in our society and in our world is totally different than it was before that, airports and everything else. So it was kind of the destruction of a certain innocence and a way of life that since then has not, it's been the way it is. So we can expect a similar kind of, I think, cataclysmic shift, explosive revelations. I wouldn't necessarily say that it would be a sort of terrorist event, but I wouldn't rule it out, that's for sure. Something that's going to blow up and be a sort of cataclysmic, paradigm-shifting event and situations. Again, I'm not saying it's going to happen on the eclipse, but this eclipse cycle will certainly be a catalyst for those kinds of paradigm-shifting situations and opportunities. I will say, besides the external global situation, internally, this is very much related to the Kundalini energy. And of course, this is one of the reasons why I definitely put Rahu in Gemini, Ketu in Sagittarius as this power of the Kundalini as well. This is where the plane of the galaxy runs. Ardra Mula is the astronomical plane of the galaxy. So at 6 degrees of Sagittarius and 6 degrees of Gemini is where the plane of the galaxy runs. So again, Rahu is that serpent coil. It's literally the Kundalini. That's how I understand it. And when it goes into this section, there's already that volatile transformation. And of course, the Ardra Mula axis is where you have Shiva at the top of the axis and Kali at the bottom, because Mula is related to Nirati, the goddess, which became Kali in later myth. So this whole energy of the cosmos as well along the Mula Ardra axis is related to Shiva and Kali. And of course, the nakshatra right before Ardra is Mrigashira, which is ruled by the god Soma. So the place where Soma and Rudra come together in the Ajna chakra as well, the unification of Soma becoming Shiva. If you are into Shaivism at all, and this union of Shiva and Shakti to create the universe, literally, if there's an astrological place for that, it's here at the Mrigashira Ardra Sandhi point more than any other, because again, Ardra, it comes from Rudra, which is Shiva, and Mrigashira is the Soma. So this is going to be major transformations happening here in Gemini. I want to back the chart up a little bit as well and go back. In my annual forecast, I also talked about this time right here, right before this eclipse. Again, we're going to have, it's been referred to already, but this is like, June 11th, a couple of weeks before, Mars is going to directly join Rahu up here. It's in Punarvasu Nakshatra. And it'll be directly opposite this Saturn Ketu, or, within, if I even move it forward a day or so, you get it's like 23, 42, 24, 12, 24, 23. It's like right there, this, late, mid to late June, right after, by the time Mars starts getting close to this around the middle of June, early middle June till early July, there's going to be, this is when we're going to see the cataclysms start to rise. You can see this is the previous full moon before the lunar eclipse. We have this over here, right? This is on June 18th, Ketu, Saturn, Moon, here in Purva Ashada, which again, that's the nakshatra of Apis. It's also very a devotional nakshatra. And then we go through, and then Mars goes into Cancer, and then we have this solar eclipse in Ardra. So this period of time, Mars joining, full moon, that couple weeks could be big. One of the big things that we also haven't talked about so much that I do want to mention, I talk about it quite a bit in my 2019 forecast, is the economic pressure that this Ketu Saturn is going to bring. I think there's going to be a real corrective economic, perhaps cataclysms or, reckoning with all of the fiat capital floated around. And of course, that's always a danger. Saturn, Ketu, when they come together, can definitely also show that kind of shaking of our stability structure. And the last time when Ketu Saturn were in Leo, it wasn't like we necessarily had an economic correction, but it was a precursor to a 2008 economic meltdown. So I could go back and look. I did look one time, and I can't remember what happened, but there was some kind of there were some legislations and some moves that were made around that time when Ketu Saturn were together that there was a lot of contentiousness around the impending economic problems. And so I think that we should also notice that and know the possibility for this dancing of Ketu and Saturn for 5 months, with each other can certainly show that sort of pressure on our economics. And again, it's also been mentioned things like the priest scandals and the church and all of the sacred cows getting somewhat blown up. Think about how things were, if you're old enough to remember, before 2001. If you were old enough and grown up at that time, I don't know how old I was, 30 something, I think. I don't remember how old I am. And how things have changed since then, at least as far as as far as what we have to contend with. So aside from that, last few quick things, when we look on a mundane level as well, we do have, these outer planets retrograde. Of course, retrograde cycles aren't uncommon, but when you get them both retrograde at the same time, that's also showing where we're backing up and reflecting on our teachings and our values and principles at that time, because Jupiter's retrograde, Saturn is retrograde as well, as we've said. So again, we're feeling kind of hesitant anyway. And again, these planets are retrograde half the time, but it means that, or at least Saturn is almost half the time. It means that we're usually reflecting about half the time on the things that we're focused on. So it's going to be that time anyway where we're a little bit hesitant, and that could lead to frustrations boiling over as well, which is what retrograde planets can bring. Mars, of course, is in its sign of a debilitation, which again can show this just kind of frustration coming up. And the last thing is Venus being here in Gemini does show a certain amount of beauty and I would say spiritual promise, because Venus has a lot of dignity, in at least natural dignity, in Gemini. And again, as spiritual people, we can get really tangled up and bogged down in the world, but that is to alert us to the unchanging, spirit within. We should expect that the world is going to be really chaotic this summer. It's going to be like, if 2018 was like, oh my God, what's going on? Wait till this stuff starts to happen. So it's really a time to connect to that inner peace and inner stillness. And there's a lot of potential there with these eclipses. The eclipses wake up the Kundalini because Rahu gets the node and gets the power. So really focus and do your sadhana and your spiritual practices July 1st, July 2nd, and the energy is so ripe then, because it's literally where the Soma and Rudra are joining. And when they join with eclipses, the heck with the world, internally, it's like your Kundalini is lit up, especially here, because this is the Kundalini axis as well. This is what I think. My cosmic excursions, is that this plane of the galaxy, this is where the Kundalini runs, the sort of cosmic Kundalini runs along the Mula Ardra axis. And maybe it's because I was born with a bunch of planets there too, but that's where it's vibrating. So if you like to meditate and you're a spiritual practitioner and all this, man, dial in around that time, because it's going to be ripe. And it's just a matter if you can ride that wave, because it's going to be a big wave. And if you can ride it, you can surf that wave really far. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll let other people jump in.
Sam, absolutely amazing. I just not only feel prepped, but feel very, see all the different possibilities. And just one thing I want to reflect about these eclipses, I like the word portal. Portal because it's a portal in its positive manifestation for us to fall victim to the darkness, or it's a portal for this spiritual evolution, connection, especially along this axis that it's going to happen in. So we can either take this higher path towards spiritual life, or we can give into our darker inclinations. And I think one of the things that the eclipse does is it brings consequences when we indulge into our darker inclinations. Just like it's the best time to tune into this high spiritual vibration. And if we do that, we could experience Kundalini awakening, glimpses of spiritual bliss. Or we can give into our darker tendencies and have to deal with serious repercussions. One
thing to say real quick too, can I just say?
Of course.
What happens is, this is also just the way to understand what we mean when we say destruction. Destruction is going to come. Everything's going to get destroyed. Those who have spiritual practices, destruction clears a path. Just like, again, what happened when we had, let's just use 9/11 as an example, that created a certain amount of destruction that paved the way for something else. And when, spiritual practices are also a destruction, you got to be willing to be destroyed. They're not fun and happy. And this is one of the things, we live so much through our emotions that people think, okay, I'll have some spiritual blissed out state. Well, that's usually, that's okay. That's sort of a byproduct of doing sadhana a lot, is bliss permeates your being. But those moments of transformation where you really break through are often challenging. They're challenges, and something gets destroyed, and it's your ego and your ignorance. So it's just a matter of what we're attached to. So we're attached to however much we're attached to our ego, outer destruction is painful. And so is inner destruction. It's really kind of the same thing. And we tend to polarize it because we're polarized, because we see inner and outer, but they're really the same thing. And try to not see them as inner and outer, or see them as different. Something will get destroyed. What's going to get destroyed? Will it destroy you? If it is, who are you? That's what the focus on, not the destruction. Oh, that's bad. It's only bad relative to what you're attached to. Does that make sense?
100% that makes sense. And it's something that was mentioned earlier, kind of the removal of everything that doesn't support you, the removal of everything that you don't need. And
that's what this is. That nakshatra, Ardra, Rudra, Shiva, that's what it is. We say, oh, Shiva, I love him. Okay, then let him blow you up, because that's what's going to happen. I'm glad you love him. You're going to have to love him.
And often the things that we feel that we need, that we're the most attached to. So that's where the suffering comes in too, that we might experience.
Yeah, and last thing, this is why Gemini is so powerful as well, because again, it's Gemini and Sagittarius are probably the most dual and adaptive to change that there is. That's what the signs are. This is why that area of the zodiac is so transformative, because they're basically saying, a Gemini person, a Sagittarius person, they're looking to change and transform all the time. It's hard for them to be solid. So this section of the zodiac, when Rahu blows things up and eclipses happen, they're adaptive to change very easily. So we can all be adaptive to change very easily, because something will change in the outer world, and we'll see something that we understand a deeper layer that we wouldn't have understood without the destruction.
Someone else would like to comment, please,
Yeah.
on the upcoming eclipse?
That was brilliant, Sam. Yeah, eclipses are always spiritual opportunities, and certainly, when you meditate during an eclipse, it kind of is very, very powerful transformation. It's 10 times more powerful than a normal meditation. The thing about this eclipse too, it's going to be seen more in South America, and so places that are particularly on edge, like Brazil, Argentina, and Venezuela, which is big in the news at the moment, are going to be really kind of hit by this eclipse. If the door isn't gone by then, you can imagine that the eclipse will finally kind of trigger some major event there. The interesting thing too, I mean, Sam reminded me, actually the last major high in the stock market occurred in October 2007 during almost at the exact point of the Saturn Ketu eclipse. So it was, you're right, Sam, it was after that the market started kind of going down. The other thing I noticed too was that the high in the euro, which was at 145 in 2000, occurred right at that same time. Now, these things aren't going to repeat exactly, but to me, it's kind of interesting. You would think, oh God, Saturn Ketu is going to be so horrible for the economy, but in 2007 in Leo, it wasn't. And so we have to kind of, but it did kind of lead into something else. So I don't like to predict, financial. I agree with Sam. We are kind of approaching this time where, the globalists, need to unravel. They've been, and that my work shows that, that's going to occur between now and 2023. Not until 2022, until Jupiter gets into Pisces. So we're kind of setting up for a big unraveling with the world, in trillions and trillions of dollars of debt and not being responsible. And Saturn Ketu is going to kind of force some event to kind of encourage that to happen. And it has to be bigger than 2008, just because the forces at work with Pluto are there also. And it's happening in the US sign of Sagittarius also. So it's a much bigger event for the US. And I believe a lot of my friends think the UK is a Sagittarius country also with the 1924 chart. And so that's where the UK and the US often go together. So it's kind of interesting that we are getting such kind of energy kind of building up around this. I do think that Jupiter, will kind of come to the rescue a little bit when it goes into Sag in November. So to me, 2019 is a little bit more difficult than 2020. Thanks.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you very much. Somya or Panditji to share on the upcoming eclipse, some remedies perhaps, Panditji?
Yes, as Sam mentioned about distraction. Without distraction, new life won't come. So distraction has to happen, and that is what is you call pralaya. Some kind of a pralaya needs to be happen, and that is the Shiva's energy. And this, especially this grahanas, like eclipses happens, and if really one can do the spiritual practice with God loving instead of God fearing, then you really enjoy the eclipse energy also. But many people, we worry about, okay, this eclipse is going to be coming into my nakshatra or my rashi, and they start thinking more about the problem than solution. So solution is, as I said in the beginning, Guru is the one who teaches us. So there is already teachings are there from the saints and sages and munis. So the best remedy for the grahanas, these eclipses, are doing your own sadhana. And as he mentioned, July first week, but I do say from even from this Rahu Ketu transition beginning, then onwards, if you put yourself into a spiritual mode until December of 2019, because we cannot say spiritual practice, which we do it on that time frame and we will close the door. No, spiritual practice has to come in life from the childhood. It's not just comes after 60 years of age. So like, I always say to people, spiritual practice is not a retirement plan. So, you have to have in your life, you enjoy doing that, and you can really get benefit out of it. Recently, when lunar eclipse happened, last week, I believe, and it was a very strong lunar eclipse. And I was doing my meditation, and I have seen some experience. I got through some experiences, and which, normally those kind of an experiences, you won't get it in normal spiritual practice, because the grahanas, this kind of an eclipses are very strong to get a new mantra initiation also, and to lead your life for future for good. So anybody is planning to get an initiation of mantras, or this is the best time for these eclipses. Again, there is another eclipse also coming end of the year. So these are the best times.
Thank you, Panditji. That is amazing and so resonant. And again, suggesting a portal or window of opportunity, which can be no greater than any other time if our spiritual quality is in the right direction. Somya, would you like to touch on the upcoming eclipse as well?
Sure, just a little bit. Thank you, everyone, for all of that. It's great. And just to add, for advising people on a personal level to, in addition and as part of your sadhana, to pay attention to what is going on in your life around the eclipses, and especially for a couple of weeks before the eclipse. I feel that people really start to see the things that are usually blind spots. And when we have an eclipse, it's like that shadow becomes visible. We're able to see into the blind spots more and do the work where we need to do it. So again, that is most likely going to be coming up in the area of your life that is Gemini in your chart, or Gemini Sagittarius, this axis. And also just to add a little bit to that after the July 2nd eclipse, there will be a partial lunar eclipse 2 weeks later on the 16th. So this entire cycle, from mid-June, we'll start to feel the effects until after that second eclipse in mid-July.
Yes, and hopefully everyone who's enjoying this transit now feels more aware, conscious, and open to all of these possibilities and potentials for our spiritual evolution during this time. Sam?
Yeah, just real quick. I wanted to just share something Barry mentioned. He walked away, but he did mention that the stock market high in 2007. I remember what it was that I was looking at before. It's going back quite a ways, but I actually remember it and have looked at it a couple times. When Saturn Ketu was joined in Gemini in 1973 to 74, and it actually started a big recession in U.S. and UK and in other places as well. So the signs are important as well. And again, Leo, you can see Saturn Ketu in Leo, because Leo is very much a fixed sign and a place where power is concentrated, tended to build up that financial, you would say security, but it was also a kind of house of cards that got bigger and bigger with Leo. But Saturn Ketu, again, back in the early 70s, in the same axis, led to a big recession, which also led to like oil shortages and all this kind of stuff in the early 70s. So just saying that I think that there could certainly be some kind of financial things going on. We even see Brexit. Actually, that financial situation hit Great Britain really hard. So it's kind of an opposite, especially what's happening in Great Britain now, where they're soft or hard Brexit going on. We could, if they hit a really hard Brexit for the world economies, that could be really hard. So I'm expecting something like that, but we'll see. It's an interesting thing to look at. It's an interesting case study, because things aren't always that sort of pro forma. But I did just want to mention that in the early 70s, there was a major sort of global recession that happened when Saturn Ketu was in Gemini. Just to bring, just to sort of button that up a little bit.
Definitely think there could be some financial implications. So anyone want to comment on the eclipse before we move on to our last question before a short break? Okay, excellent. Somya, this next question is for you. I would like, as we discussed in May, Mars will enter Gemini and conjoin with the North Node, Rahu, until late June. So I was wondering if you could please discuss this this transit in detail, related aspects, and its effect and influence during this time. This Rahu, Mars, and everything related to it.
Sure, thank you. I found this one of the interesting transits of the summer, not only because it's Mars and Rahu together, but of course, as we've been talking about, it's going to be opposite from Saturn and Ketu. And not only that, Sam showed you the chart already, but the sky is going to be very polarized during this time, during a lot of this month. Can you see that? Yeah. You can see all of the planets really, really clustered along this Gemini-Sagittarius axis for a lot of this time. So just to start with the energy of Mars and Rahu together, I feel that in general, this is a very potentially explosive kind of energy, but I'll give a few examples of that, but I also want to add that I do think that it's somewhat mitigated by Saturn being joined with Ketu on the other side of this axis at this time. But just in general, Mars and Rahu, they're both fighters. They can both be aggressive and intense. Mars is a planet that brings action and energy and our will to fight. He is the inner warrior. Rahu, of course, is going to intensify whatever he's joining. So Rahu will intensify and amplify the energy of Mars, the energy of the warrior here. Now with this in Gemini, a place where we experience intellectual ideas, communication, we want to watch out during this time for explosive arguments, for really intense disagreements, and be very careful of what you say during this time. Mercury is also going to be joining Mars and Rahu here for part of this transit. For Mars-ruled people especially, you may feel your energy is aggravated during this time. There could be some pitta disorders, some skin disorders, especially if you're ruled by Mars, if you're Aries or Scorpio rising. But also for everyone, whichever areas of your life are ruled by Mars in your natal chart, these could be disrupted and aggravated by this Mars-Rahu conjunction, which is from May 6th until June 22nd. Now, the last couple of times that we have had this conjunction, now again, I'm using the mean node. So the last conjunction of Mars and Rahu was August 17th through 26th of 2017. This was just when we had the Great American Eclipse for one, but also on August 17th to begin that conjunction, there was the terror attack in Barcelona with a van driving through so many people. There was the oil tanker collision of the USS John McCain with the oil tanker. There was Hurricane Harvey hitting Texas very intensely during this 10 days. Now, what I do like, again, there's some kind of mitigation possible here, even with displacement. That transit ended with a march for peace in Barcelona. So, and the American eclipse was actually very transformative and positive for a lot of people on a personal level. Now, the transit before that of Mars and Rahu was in November, December of 2015. And during that time, we experienced the terror attacks in Paris, a state of emergency in Flint, Michigan with their water contamination, and then some intense floods in Tamil Nadu and across South America. So this is a time where there is potentially explosive energy. Mars is very fiery, can be explosive. Rahu can be very impulsive. So we have to be careful on a personal level too, when our instincts feel very aggravated, not to act out violently. The thing that I do think is very interesting is with Saturn and Ketu opposite the Mars-Rahu conjunction. I looked back at the last couple of transits of these that we had, and the last one was in 1997. There weren't some huge events that happened during this time, but there were a few interesting things. The Timothy McVeigh was sentenced for the Oklahoma City bombings. O.J. Simpson was found liable in the civil case. the city of Hebron was handed over back to Palestinian rule from Israel. So there are some things here that were kind of like reversals of intense or violent situations. So I find that interesting. Also, in terms of the innovation that is also possible and even intensified or amplified with Mars joining Rahu and Gemini, Dolly the sheep, the first cloned mammal, was announced the last time we had Mars Rahu opposite Saturn Ketu. Now, the other historical example, I find this really interesting. The time before 1997, the last time we had Mars Rahu opposite Saturn Ketu was in 1962, October and November, and this was the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Mars and Rahu were exact on October 20th. Saturn and Ketu were exact on October 15th, and the Cuban Missile Crisis started October 14th. So I think this is a really good example of the really potentially explosive energy of Mars and Rahu together. The world was on the brink of nuclear destruction during these weeks. And yet, the Saturn influence, I really feel, helped to rein people in, to really look at what we need to do to stop this type of destruction from happening, to create some kind of balancing structure. So during that time, of course, that situation was resolved, and we didn't reach that point of nuclear war. So again, it's important to look out for energies really being intensified, especially for the Mars-ruled people, potential explosiveness, and of course, as always, doing our sadhana, doing pitta pacifying activities, I think is going to be helpful during this time, especially again, if you are Mars-ruled, if you are Gemini ascendant, and those are some things to look out for now.
Excellent. Excellent analysis, Somya. That is so helpful as we look at this intense aspect which is coming up. This is something which is, you know, can have a really big impact. There's a lot of potential outcomes here. And I like that you discussed so many different possibilities and some historic relevancy. Thank you so much. Would someone else like to comment on Rahu, Mars, and its aspect of Saturn, Ketu? One sec, Barry.
So one of the things that's interesting to me is, you know, Gemini, you know, in Sanskrit is Matuna, which translates as copulation. So Gemini is a very kind of sexual sign of the zodiac. And, you know, Mars Rahu there, you know, also puts a lot of sexual energy there. And you can certainly, we have to be concerned about sexual violence and this whole issue around sexual predatory energy kind of coming to a head. You know, there's been a huge dialogue around it for, you know, with the Me Too movement for, you know, about, I don't know when exactly it started, but it seems like, you know, there has to be some kind of culmination with that Mars Rahu in Gemini, and the eclipses happening in that node, you know, so it'll be interesting to see if that happens. And, you know, certainly, you know, we also have to be, you know, be safe during that time if you're a single woman, and you know, certainly men have to be aware of those kind of urges that kind of come up.
Yes, totally. Someone else, Rahu, Mars, Sadasivaji?
Yeah, first, Somya, that was fantastic. Great work. I loved all the case studies, man. That's just really, really solid. A few things to add. And I like the theory and the idea that Ketu Saturn adds a kind of stabilizing force. I definitely think that's shown in certain examples for sure. And we'll hopefully see some of that here in 62. Of course, you always have to look at the planet. It was in Capricorn, so there's a lot more, you know, dignity of Saturn there, and definitely helped to avert, you know, the catastrophe, because Saturn had a lot more dignity than Mars, especially at that time. A few things about this placement is we have Mercury in the sign. So if we're going to get really down to it, when we have the Mars, I'll bring my chart up again if it's okay, just to show because instead of it being so theoretical, one second. Yeah, so just back this up instead of trying to visualize it. So we're talking about this, something like this. So we also have Mercury there. So anytime the ruler is there, it's very, very stable. It helps to stabilize based on what the sign is. This is happening in Gemini again, which is about information, and not just information. It's about, the energy isn't necessarily clear. It can be quite scattered. But one of the things about being in Gemini is, we do see this emergence of ideas, and again, like you're saying, arguments and fights and battles. I'm definitely brought back again to the potential for, even like Barry was saying, with like, I can see this like sex scandals and things with the church being big. I predicted several months ago that all this stuff with Pope Francis's chart, if you look at his chart as well, you can see he's got a Gemini ascendant and planets all on this axis as well right now. So, but having Mercury there, I think, is going to help to mitigate the potential damage and destruction that can come with this Mars Rahu for sure. But I definitely sort of reflect back how transformative this can be. But I just wanted to bring up the idea, the fact that Mercury is also there. And then before the end of the transit, Venus, or no, actually by the time the transit finishes, Mars leaves before Venus is in the sign, and then Mercury also leaves. So they both kind of leave. Let me make this day at a time. So Mercury pokes his head out, and then 2 days later Mars does. So having Mercury there for most of the transits, just go back and see exactly, is Mercury there the whole time? I think Mars gets there first. So this point, when Mars is there but Mercury isn't, which is from June 1st, before Mercury gets there, June 1st, it's only a couple days. Okay. And then Mercury is there the rest of the time. So the transit is somewhat blessed with having Mercury there pretty much the whole time. So I think that makes a difference. I just wanted to say that.
Excellent. Thank you also for pulling up the chart. That's very helpful. Panditji, some insights on Rahu Mars remedies in particular you would think for that combination?
Well, the remedy is it's like an graha yuddha. You have to do practice the planetary remedies, and especially Rahu is a Durga related with the Divine Mother, and Kartikeya mantras will helpful during the time.
Skanda.
Yes.
One thing I just wanted to comment on the Rahu Mars is, I always say Mars can be very instinctual, act upon its instincts, and and Rahu can be quite impulsive. So when you get instinctive and compulsive together, that's where all these potential for outbursts of anger and aggression and violence can come from. Someone could be feeling the urge to commit a violent act, and then because of this combination of Rahu Mars, they act on that impulse. They act on desire. That could be something sexual. That could be something physical. That could be just to have control or power over someone else. Sometimes Rahu and Mars, it's a power game or a power struggle. And anchored by the Saturn Ketu, I like how everyone is pointing out that somehow Saturn is acting as a balancer to this whole thing. And I think that means for those of us who are on a spiritual path and have a spiritual practice, that we can kind of, when we feel these impulses or these instincts towards our more tamasic or rajasic quality, we can move towards spiritual sadhana and practices. That's the Saturn Ketu side of it. But I do feel worried and concerned for the people who don't have spiritual practices during this transit, because I think it's going to be hard not to act on your impulses and your desires if you don't have a spiritual practice or some discipline to constrain all of your desires. So that's where I think the challenging side, I think for those of us on a spiritual path, this is a very powerful alignment to advance through discipline. But on the other side of it, if we're not on any kind of spiritual evolutionary path consciously, maybe we act on our aggressive impulses during this time. So that's the two sides of the spectrum, I feel. Does anyone want to comment on Rahu, Mars, Saturn, Ketu, or really share anything before we take a 30-minute break?
Yeah. I think that was really brilliant. I think we have to remember that, most people who are involved in Vedic astrology are, kind of do regular sadhana, and you just have to stay on top of your sadhana during these difficult transits, and then it kind of transform it. And then it's interesting because you can always observe what's coming up, because I always notice during these difficult transits that, Mars, Rahu, you do get kind of aggressive or overpowering, and you have to kind of say, oh, there I go. You have to kind of witness it. Sadhana kind of allows us to kind of witness our thoughts and emotions. And, Eckhart Tolle reminds us that, most of our thoughts and emotions are garbage. And we have to kind of learn to kind of witness these kind of garbage thoughts that are going to come up and to not act on them. Otherwise, we get into trouble.
Thank you, Barry. Sadasivaji?
Yeah, just the last thing. What you said was so important, Ksanati. And again, I just want to go back, though, to the Rashi that it's in, because, again, we say Mars, we act on this, we act on this. Gemini is an intellectual sign. So again, it's much more about the mind and the thoughts. And Somya said it really well about arguments and battles and fights, and I see more destruction through ideas and language and, thought crimes or violence through words and language and speech than this kind of, watch your impulses or you're going to rape somebody, or I don't know, I don't see it where it's so much physical confrontation with Mars, Gemini, Rahu. I see it much more of these intellectual battles, which are just as destructive. But that's the thing to really watch, where you get aggravated in your mind and your thoughts get really aggravated. And it's because Mars is very black and white. It's about opinions, not about ideas. Ideas and opinions aren't the same thing. Opinion, we've already made up our mind about what's right, and we're ready to fight about it with Mars. We're ready to defend our opinions rather than figure out what's going on, which is Mercury and Gemini. So the way that Mars interrupts Gemini energy, or even Mercury energy, is we mistake our ideas for our opinions, or we mistake our opinions for ideas. So this is what we got to watch, because an opinion is not an idea. You've already made up your mind what's right and wrong, who's good and who's bad, and we're ready to fight over it. And so that's what we need to watch. I don't necessarily think it's going to be we're going to go out and physically fight, because that's not really the nature of Gemini. It's to get into these verbal battles and verbal abuse and feel like we're justified because, well, you're wrong anyway, so you deserve what I'm about to give you.
Mm-hmm. I think Mercury in that sense is
and that's why I said with Mercury there, I should have been more thoughtful about it. With Mercury there, seemingly almost for the whole transit, basically Mercury is there, so the intelligence is there and the discrimination is there while the transit is happening. So that frustration and aggravation in the mind, because there's a lot of things we think are right and we need to defend them. But with Mercury there, when the frustration comes into the mind with Mars and then gets conflated with Rahu, Mercury is still there. Again, it's a great catalyst for our mind to really perceive the truth and to really get the idea, to get the ideas correctly. If we can diffuse the heat and certainty of our opinions and our sort of combative nature.
Yeah, I think
and then the eclipse comes shortly thereafter. So that whole cycle of Mars, that's why I showed Mars going through Gemini before I talked about the eclipse, because we got all that coming and then we get an eclipse in Ardra. So that section of the year is really tricky.
Yeah, I think Mercury could be acting like a guardian angel in that sense. And
that's always the case with the ruler. The ruler is protecting the sign in the house. It's like you're in your house. So even if you got a bunch of cretins there, if you run the house, they have to adapt to your environment.
Yeah, and I think it makes those physical battles much more intellectual, like you're saying. It protects them from going to that physical place, makes them more in the buddhi, the intellectual part of the...
Yeah, and then the energy of Mars, the energy of Rahu, the energy of the sun becomes power, because all the planets are power. they're all power. And when the power concentrates, there's opportunity and there's possibility, even difficult ones or whatever, especially when the ruler is there, we can actually get to the truth of that power.
Yeah, Mercury's got a big position there.
Yeah.
Any other comments before the break?
Well, it's a Devasara Yuddha, like, the Yuddha between the demons and the gods, like a positivity and negativity.
And I appreciate all you guys are adding about Mercury, but I also just want to point out that the Mars-Rahu transit starts on May 6th, and then Mercury moves in on June 1st. So we still are going to have about 3 weeks of Mars-Rahu without Mercury there as the guard.
Thanks for bringing it up. I was doing it in real time. So that's the time to really watch before Mars gets in there. That, at least I think that's really the time to watch.
Yeah. Less likely to think about the action before it's taken.
Yeah, watch that time, because we don't have Mercury there going, oh, this is fun, new ideas. It's like, rah!
Jumping right back into things, I'd like to start with you, Sadasivaji.
Okay.
Would you please discuss Jupiter's 2019 transit, specifically focusing on the Gandanta period, the shift into Sagittarius between Mula and Jyeshta Nakshatra?
Absolutely. So let me share my screen here. All right. So I focused on, where is it? Saturn, Ketu, no, where is it? Yeah. So in my forecast this year, I focused on this section, March 13th to May 8th. So that's a couple months. So March 13th, let me go back a couple days. So you can see March 13th, Jupiter's within 1 degree. So, and then it goes into Sagittarius. Oh, let me pull up, sorry, let me get the chart. Okay, so this is March 13th, and then to May 8th, I'll just run it forward several weeks. You'll see Jupiter is going to go into about 1 degree, then stop, go retrograde back, and then when he comes back to here again, it'll be around May 8th. Let's see if it works. So there he pokes his head in Sagittarius. This is April 3rd, goes up, goes retrograde, goes back. I said May 8th. This is May 1st. By May 8th, it's about 1 degree again here. So that's like 2 months with Rahu back and forth between Jyeshta and Mula Nakshatra. So let me go back. So it winds up being in Mula from like, so March 29th, he goes into Sagittarius, and he'll be in Mula Nakshatra until he goes back into Scorpio on April 23rd. So those are the crucial dates, but what we're going to see here is this shifting in between the Scorpio and Sagittarius Rashis. Of course, this is sidereal zodiac. Every Vedic astrology text has the nakshatras pinned to the Rashis. In every text, it either says the Rashis are made of 9 nakshatra padas, or the Rashis and nakshatras are aligned. Every text says it. And most texts also refer to these Gandanta points. And Gandanta is when we have this juncture between the water and the fire sign, then there's no nakshatra energy to bridge the Rashi. In every other example, for example, when Libra goes into Scorpio, we have Vishaka nakshatra. When Virgo goes into Libra, we have Chitra nakshatra. So there's always a nakshatra to maintain a certain continuity. Even though it's changing Rashis, there's a stable nakshatra. But when we hit Cancer Leo, there's a Gandanta point where there's like a hard stop. Then when we have Scorpio, Sagittarius, there's a hard stop. And then Pisces, Aries, there's a hard stop, but with Rashi and Nakshatra. This one in particular, the Jyeshta Mula Gandanta, is probably the most intense as far as the potential for sort of cataclysmic, social, and just kind of, somewhat stressful energy. Jyeshta is ruled by Lord Indra, who was the king of the gods, and also the one who would always sort of get into battle over, difficulties and things like that. It's the section of Scorpio that can be emotionally willful and ready to do battle. The other parts of Scorpio have more of a quality of devotion. They're emotionally intense, but they're often more devotional. So does Jyeshta, don't get me wrong. But for instance, Anuradha and Vishaka they naturally acclimate more toward that friendliness. For example, Anuradha Nakshatra is ruled by Mitra, which means friendship, friendliness. But then you get to Jyeshta, and it's ruled by Indra, who is the king of the gods, ready to exact vengeance on those who have perpetrated injustice against the kingdom and those sorts of things. Again, it's a very powerful energy to have that emotional courage to really, transform our inner darkness and pain. Because Scorpio is a sign where we learn that quality of life, where we learn that we're not in control and that everything is going to change, and it fills us with fear and stress and worry. And Jyeshta gives like the emotional courage to take that on, but it can also bring a kind of vengeance. Again, if we don't know ourselves and we're not grounded in our heart, and instead we're attached to the external circumstances of the world, it's very easy to think, oh yeah, the reason I'm suffering and I'm happy is because of what you did to me, what you did. And we get into this kind of exacting revenge and settling scores and things like that. In the negative sense, this can have a lot of that Jyeshta energy. And then Jyeshta and Scorpio then moves into Sagittarius, and the next nakshatra is Mula. The first nakshatra in Sagittarius is Mula, which literally means root, to uproot, to pull out by the roots, and to plant new seeds of karma, and to put that darkness behind us and that imagined fear and that stress and vulnerability of Scorpio. We put it behind us. There's a stop, and we put that behind us. But the first act of putting that behind us is pulling out all of the roots, pulling that fear and vulnerability up by the roots and uprooting it, which is Mula Nakshatra. So again, the first section of Sagittarius is quite transformative, and filled with some stress, because it's ruled by the goddess Niriti, which became the goddess Kali in the later myths. But it's that destruction and calamity. And again, you want to know that this is the section of the sky that is related to the plane of the galaxy. When we get into Mula Nakshatra, you're literally looking back at the center of the galaxy. Mula is the core of the galaxy. So Jupiter going back and forth over these two really transformative places. And again, it's within 1 degree. So the Gandanta means when it's within 1 degree, it's at that very unpredictable place. So it's already a transformative shift when we go from Jyeshta into Mula. But what happens is, Jupiter is going to slow down. First of all, he usually doesn't cover that section of the zodiac so slowly. He'll usually go over it, but here he's starting to slow down as he approaches the Gandanta the first time. He's already moving very slow and about to go stationary retrograde. Right? So it's very slow. And then he goes, and then he goes stationary direct to go back over it. Again, the speed of the planets are really important. And so during this entire time, Jupiter is moving very slowly between these 2 points that are quite volatile. The volatility of the ego having the emotional courage to transform and become spiritually developed. One of the stories of Lord Indra is he allowed himself to be swallowed by the dragon who had stolen all the water from the earth. Lord Indra slayed that mighty beast by allowing himself to be swallowed and to go into the belly of the beast and then cut his way out of his stomach with a sword. He took the sword and cut open the stomach, and that returned the water to the earth. Scorpios love this story. Swallowed by the beast. The courage to be swallowed by the beast and then to cut ourselves out to return the water. So this is very much that quality of Indra and that quality of Scorpio, to allow ourselves to be swallowed up by our insecurities and then be able to, fight our way out of it. So that intensity, and then moving from that into the hope and inspired purpose of Sagittarius, which comes next. But in order to get to that inspired purpose and to really step into those higher teachings, we need to uproot all of that darkness, which is the first nakshatra of Mula. So having Jupiter going back and forth for a couple months in these two very subtle places is going to be really, as we say, transformative. This is a very subtle portion of the zodiac, maybe the most explosive, all things considered, because the Gandanta points are where that happens. And Aslesha Magha is somewhat transformative as well, but it's more personally. Like Aslesha Magha Gandanta, you'll see a lot of personal tragedies, in fact, even suicides and stuff I've seen many times in that Aslesha Magha. And actually, Revati Ashwini is more liberation. It's definitely more gentle Gandanta. But this one, Jyeshta Mula, is like, everything is really volatile here. And again, it's where the insecurities of the soul are getting blown open. And one of the main things that we experience here, especially with Scorpio to Sagittarius, is Scorpio is where we have the illusion of control. You have the illusion that you're in control of something, that you're in control of the world or some portion of the world, and you're not. You're not. It can all blow apart at any moment, and at some point, it's all going to blow apart. And that feels really scary, and we're stressed out, and we feel vulnerable. So what do? We have to find a higher answer, higher meaning, and higher purpose, which is Sagittarius. So where these rashis converge together, we have this Gandanta point between Jyeshta, ready to have the courage to be swallowed by the beast, to be swallowed by our insecurities, and then Mula, which is to then uproot that and then align, plant these seeds of devotion. And then we water those seeds of devotion in Purva Ashada. Then our victory over darkness is guaranteed in Uttara Ashada. Then the nakshatras build on themselves that way. But this section here is where there's a lot of volatility. And the Mula nakshatra is ruled by, again, it's a very Kali kind of energy. So again, from March 13th through May 8th, Jupiter's going to dance back and forth. And of course, it's Jupiter, which is guru. And higher teachings, higher wisdom, what inspires us? Expect your philosophies and your principles and your, what you think is the truth, what you think is the higher answer. Expect that to get shaken up. And again, even quote spiritual people or people who have gurus and whatnot, we need to have that blown open and blown up sometime so that we can really get to a deeper level of understanding of what our teachings mean, who our teachers are, and all of that stuff. And so last thing I'll say is that, of course, wherever this falls in your chart, that's going to be really powerful. Like if you're Pisces, it's between the 9th and 10th house. If you're Aquarius, it's between your 10th and 11th house. If you're Cancer, it's between your 5th and 6th house. Again, these are the things I go over in detail in my annual forecast for each of the signs. If you're interested, then you can get that. You can follow the links that I've put up. But this is going to be very transformative relative to whatever your ascendant is. Most people know their sidereal ascendant. So watch for this transit. March 13th through May 8th, Jupiter is going back and forth between these two signs, this very volatile Gandanta point. Also, you want to notice whether Jupiter is a natural friend. Whether he's a functional friend or functional enemy. Like for the Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Moon ruled people, Jupiter is a natural friend. His energy is naturally easy to integrate and feels inspiring and whatnot. For the others, he's either a neutral or even he's an inimical planet as well. So again, you have to use discrimination when you look at astrology and don't poo-poo this stuff. Well, but it's still Jupiter. It's blah, blah, blah. You know, Jupiter is a very uncomfortable planet for Libra, Taurus people. Can be certainly uncomfortable for Saturn-ruled people and Mercury-ruled people. And it's real. It's absolutely true. And so you want to notice how those things also play out at that time. But I expect this to be a kind of low-level, behind-the-scenes, very important energy. Watch how things shift between our insecurities and fears becoming inspirations and hopes in the world. And also, as you know, your natal ascendant, notice how Jupiter pokes his head in there to bring a little bit of promise maybe in Sagittarius, but then he's not far enough in the sign yet to really have traction, and then he backs up. And again, these transition points are very subtle, and energy feels like it's not solid. So we feel things shifting a little bit, but it's not solid. And so we have the potential for volatility. Last thing I'll say, this is definitely a transit where you can see some of this like religious persecution and triggering and stuff like that. I wouldn't be surprised if with global events we see, and again, it's not necessarily religious like Muslims or whatever, but it's otherism. We talked about this before, this whole otherism, the Republicans and the Democrats, or the Mexicans and the this one and the this and the that, and seeing these kind of issues where our fanatical beliefs or our beliefs about others and whatnot start to really kind of, blow up. And we might see some of these tensions escalate and blow up because, this also exists opposite this Mars and all that stuff. And of course, the sun it'll be exact opposition to the sun at some point because, Jupiter turns retrograde when he's opposite the sun, right? So anyway, that's what I want to offer about that.
Thank you, Sam, so much for that comprehensive presentation on the Gandanta Mula Jyeshta Jupiter vibration. One of the things that I am really grateful that you brought about is that, sometimes we can have this misconception that Jupiter is always benefic, or we can have this misconception that Jupiter is always auspicious. Now, not if you're an astrologer, but it's given this energy where it's somehow overall more benefic than all the other planets. And there are certain scriptural references for the reason why that is the way it is so. But nonetheless, when there are these Gandanta positions or challenging positions and shifts with the planets, even when they're mostly benefic in their expression, the churning that goes on through us when those energies get activated are not necessarily going to be comfortable for us. So we talked about, also is the Jupiter functional benefic in the chart? How is it interacting with the ruler of your ascendant or the ruler of your lugna? So these are different things to consider, but this is a very important transit that I wanted to bring into discussion today.
And anyone who has planets there, of course, as well. If you got planets at this Jyeshta Mula or, around there or close to that, again, it'll be very important in that sense.
And I just wanted to concur with what Sam was saying about something happening in the spiritual religious realm, Jyeshta also being the eldest nakshatra. And one of the things that's associated with being the eldest is sometimes this energy of superiority. And one of the things that we already experience within religion is superiority. My religion, my gods are more superior or greater than yours. Hopefully this is an opportunity for us to evolve past this type of thinking. Would someone else like to comment on the Jupiter Gandanta Mula Jyeshta vibration?
Yeah, I would be happy to. We had Saturn going through this Gandanta and going retrograde in there for a while, a couple of years ago, and there's always I just want to emphasize there's always a lot of emotional kind of turmoil that comes up in the Gandanta the last 40 minutes, particularly of Scorpio, which is much more kind of volatile emotionally, and you have to kind of pay attention to. You start coming up with all these kind of bizarre thoughts and fears and energy, because it's like, Scorpio can be kind of like a cesspool sometimes, or, and it just kind of whirls, and you have to kind of really catch it. Otherwise, you kind of spin out of control. The Mula section of the Gandanta is always like, problematic in that it does kind of tear things apart. I mean, I think we had 9/11 in Mula Nakshatra a number of years ago, and I often see that people go through kind of big, and actually this will be more so when we get Jupiter fully in there in Sagittarius. There is this like Kali energy, like Sam was describing, where things kind of start breaking out. Your house, your job falls apart, your house falls apart, your money falls apart, or something like that. And specifically with these transits, if you're Sag rising or Pisces rising, or if Jupiter is the Atmakarka of your chart, or if you're in a Jupiter period, you're going to feel the impact of that Jupiter Gandanta more so than some of the other signs. Although there was always an impact because we always feel everything, but you'll particularly feel an effect if you're Pisces, Sag, or a Jupiter Atmakarka, or in a Jupiter period. Anyway, that's all I wanted to add. Thank you, Sam. That was brilliant.
Thank you, Barry, Sada Sivaji. Pandit or Somya, would you like to touch on this transit? Either of you?
Pretty much just in alignment with what Barry just said. I wanted to point out for Jupiter ruled people to really watch their health during this whole period, not just because of the Gandanta, but also any time that a planet is right on the cusp within 1 degree of changing signs, it's going to be weaker anyway, even more so because of the Gandanta position.
Well, yeah, main health might be the main thing.
So let's move on to a different aspect of the presentation. Sam, if you could just
yeah, sorry, I forgot. Yeah,
it's all good, brother. So for the next question, I'd like to focus it towards you, Barry. The question that I have for you is, in 2019, we'll kind of bridging onto Jupiter, but also looking a little bit into 2020. In 2019, Jupiter will join Ketu and Sagittarius twice, once briefly, and then a second time they will travel together for a long while, and that will go into 2020. So I want you to talk a little bit about the Jupiter-Ketu conjunction transit, how that'll be showing up, and also kind of leading that into 2020 a bit.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I personally love Jupiter-Ketu because I have it conjunct in Gemini, and so I seem to know it well. The wonderful thing about Jupiter-Ketu is it gives you deep devotion toward gurus or teacher figures. And particularly, it's kind of wonderful for strong intuitive abilities to kind of have a sense of knowingness about things. I mean, I never totally understood this about myself until recently, that I jump into all kinds of things that, people would be scared of doing. And I just somehow I'll know how to do it when I jump into it. And I think that's one of the really positives about Jupiter-Ketu connections. Jupiter, part of the challenge with Jupiter and Ketu and Sag is, sometimes planets that are too strong are a little, get a little bit overpowering. I always talk about my Aries friend who's got Mars in Capricorn, and she's like a general, and she blows away everybody with her abilities to do things, but she kind of, everybody hates her, and they kind of like, attack her because they can't deal with her powerful energy. And I think both Ketu and Jupiter and Sag are, Jupiter is certainly, totally at home there, so it's not overpowering, but Ketu is pretty strong there. And so Jupiter-Ketu can create kind of religious fanaticism. And so one has to be really kind of, I've had periods of this in my life where I'm so into kind of promoting something religious, or something that I strongly believe in, and I kind of overpower people with that energy. So the worst part of that Jupiter-Ketu conjunction, you can get a little too fanatical, and you might blow people away. You might have to kind of, find a showcase to do that, like join Toastmasters and give a debate on, get into a debate or something on something you're feverish about, to kind of channel that energy. But it will be up strongly. It can be very strongly, spiritual for finding a guru and for feeling devoted to a guru. And I think it's kind of very wonderful in that respect. But there's some dark sides about that conjunction. Also, for example, Jupiter is the Karaka for husbands and children. And so, when we have those close conjunctions within a couple degrees, November 4th to November 20th, 2019, and December 26th to January 25th, 2020. That's in the true note, although I use me note actually more in charts. People could have major problems with their children. They may feel guilty that they haven't given enough energy to their children. They may have problems with their husbands, or be attracted to eccentric people in their life who want to become potential husbands. So it also has that ability on kind of on a more mundane level. It can, Jupiter is also very connected to money, and Jupiter Ketu conjunctions actually are one of the Karaka combinations for bankruptcy. So you have to, and it's happening in the sign of Sagittarius. So you have to wonder if, some of these countries that have been totally on the edge, like Turkey and, the U.S. There's a lot of countries totally on the edge with their debt levels. You have to wonder if some major event doesn't happen and tip them over the edge, and they are forced into bankruptcy, or major corporations that have key planets and key areas of Sagittarius could have that energy also. It doesn't have to be that way. It depends. If you were in a Jupiter Ketu period and a Ketu Jupiter period, and it was happening maybe in the 12th house or something like that, of depending on the sign in the country or something, it could have more of an impact. But it is something that could come up. The other thing is, Ketu tends to kind of scatter energy, and when you get Jupiter and Ketu together, you can kind of find yourself pursuing multiple spiritual paths, and you could end up like changing. I'm very kind of devoted in my spiritual orientation, but I meet people that every month they're taking a new seminar and going to a new guru, and they never really go deep with anything because they get very scattered. It's kind of like if you're digging a well and you want to, hit water, you have to go deep with one path. But if you dig 20 little holes and you never hit water, so Jupiter Ketu can kind of scatter spiritual energy sometimes, particularly if it's a very tight conjunction, and that you're trying too many things and you don't go deep with anything. So you need to be more devoted to one energy, otherwise you get into trouble. The thing that I like about Jupiter and Jupiter Ketu and Sag is I think Jupiter is going to kind of save the day when it goes into Sag in November 2019, because we'll have had all this tumult in the Sag Gemini axis, and Saturn will go into Capricorn in January of 2020 and also be at home, and Ketu and Jupiter are kind of together there, and I do feel it's like a better time for the world. More humanitarian values are going to come up more. I think actually, Rahu governs immigrants, and certainly with Saturn aspecting Rahu in transit still this whole month, the tensions and climaxes around immigrants are going to be very strong into this summer. But maybe finally with Jupiter going into Sagittarius, there'll be some humanitarian solutions finally that come out for this huge crisis, which it's a very difficult thing to solve, but it seems like Jupiter will bring its humanitarian energy finally in Sag to help solve the problem. But I think that's looking ahead. One of the interesting things going on is I ran the annual charts for April 5th, 2019, which is the New Year chart for the spring, and it's used to kind of predict the future of countries. And it turns out when you look at that chart, the U.S. Is Aquarius rising with Venus and Mercury in Aquarius, and Venus is the ruler of the year for the US, but because of the way sunrise happens in the other countries, most of the New Year charts for Europe and China and Russia and Korea, all of them are many of them are on are Gemini rising. And what happens is then you've got all that tension between Saturn, Ketu, and Rahu on their axes. So to me, it seems like a lot of the transformations that need to happen in the world are going to happen more so in Europe. And you see that happening with, already kind of in France bubbling up. And you can see, you can easily see like places like Hungary and Poland that are kind of rebelling against the EU. That energy is kind of bubbling up. But you can see it in the annual charts that there's going to be this huge dynamic tension between, Mars, Ketu, Saturn, Rahu on the Gemini Sag axis for the annual charts, and it's not hitting the U.S. as badly because the ruler of the year for the U.S. is Venus, with Venus in Aquarius, and certainly there are some problems. The ruler of Aquarius is with Ketu in that chart in the 11th, but it's not nearly as bad as Europe. So it's kind of fascinating. I think Jupiter and Ketu is kind of a real bright spot. And I think Ketu just gets uplifted, next year finally when Jupiter comes to the rescue. Great.
That was so in depth and so much to be excited about. I think that there's a connection between this transit we've discussed and the transit that Sam just discussed. We're seeing Jupiter go through this more challenging position, lots of potential for transformation in this Gandanta as it makes its way into Sagittarius and then makes its way through Sagittarius. I'm feeling very optimistic about that. I'm feeling very positive about that for our country, our humanity, for all of us here. Would someone else like to touch on Jupiter, Ketu as well? Sadasivaji?
Sure. Yeah, good job, Barry. One of the things that I said, and I kind of in my annual forecast, this is really 2019 is really a Sagittarius year with Saturn in Sagittarius, Ketu Sagittarius, then Jupiter goes into Sagittarius at the end of the year, as Barry said, which, what I've maintained is that it's going to be challenging around Sagittarius themes for much of the year. And this is things related, and again, I'm talking sort of culturally and collectively. It has to do with things like justice, legal issues, people that have been, perpetrating unjust crimes or whatever it is, people that have been getting away with a lot of stuff and not having the consequences for their legal misdeeds will see some corrections this year. With Saturn and Ketu both in Sagittarius. Sagittarius, more than any other sign, is a sign of the legal system. Of course, it's ruled by Jupiter, much more so than Pisces. Pisces is more about God's law. Sagittarius is more about man's law. They're interspersed. Sagittarius has a lot to do with religion. Pisces with, sort of cosmic unity kind of thing. But definitely on a mundane level, the legal system and justice has to do with Sagittarius. So I think we're going to see a lot of high-level criminality, especially within governments and whatever, come to the forefront, and we're going to see it. It's very much what I said earlier, too, when I was talking about Rahu going in Gemini. We're going to see some stuff, and it's going to challenge us to go, okay, this is really what's been going on. Beyond all the fake news or the this or the that, some real ramifications are going to come about, and hopefully, again, as a culture, what's going to happen when our sacred cows get knocked down or whatever? Are we able to adjust and understand that intellectually, which is the Rahu and Gemini? But that whole area of Sagittarius definitely feels that pressure with Saturn, Ketu, as we're talking about. And yes, by the end of the year, it's November 4th is the date that Jupiter finally sets up in Sagittarius. Then for the next year, it's going to really restore some semblance of dharma and purpose, rather than utter confusion and bewilderment about, well, just because it showed up on this news show, it's wrong, or this or that, or who knows what anything means, because anything can mean anything. again, this is the era that we're living in now. Like, facts don't matter anymore. Everybody's got their own version of facts. This is the karma that we're going to get with Rahu going through Gemini, is the consequences of this stuff. And it's pretty heavy, because there have been people getting away with all kinds of stuff. And we're going to see a lot of consequences come down, and the kind of cultural global spasm that's going to result. So I agree that later in the year, when Jupiter goes into Sagittarius, that's going to be a point of stability. And I could say that the previous transit of Jupiter through the Gandanta that I just talked about is kind of dipping our toe in the water a little bit. What's this going to be like when justice starts to happen and we see things start to kind of blow apart and get a little crazy? Then months later, he goes in there. And so keep that in mind, folks. That's the way I see it.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Would anyone else like to touch on Jupiter Ketu? One thing I wanted to say is just to channel my brother, Dr. Dennis Harness, for a second. And this isn't his quote, but he uses it all the time, and I love it. He says, "The mystic swims in the water that the schizophrenic drowns." And that is what I think of when I think of Jupiter Ketu, is this great potential for mystical experiences, spiritual devotion, evolution with the guru, evolution in religion, and also on the other side of it, schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder, people acting really extreme and radical and acting out of a place of extreme or radical action. So I think it'll be interesting when Jupiter and Ketu separate again after being together for a while. But yes, I think it's very promising, Jupiter and Ketu. And I am really excited to see Jupiter's transit in Sagittarius. Any comments? We move on to the next question with Panditji. Panditji, would you please discuss the December 26th solar eclipse in Sagittarius and implicated nakshatra?
Yes, namaste. So the 26th December 2019 is Thursday. This eclipse is happening on the nakshatra of Mula, and it's happening in the Sandhi, Lagna Sandhi of Makara and Dhanur Lagna. So will have, Makara Lagna is in the Balya Avastha, which is the young, and Dhanur Lagna is the Vruddhapya, old. So the Shantis, appropriate remedies definitely will help on those, this nakshatra Mula, and the Rashis affected by Purva and nakshatra, Dhanura, Sagittarius, and Uttarashadha, Purvashadha, and Mula. These nakshatras also will be affected. And again, earlier as we spoke about the eclipse time, what we should do and what we should not do, do's and don't do's. If you just take it into action, definitely you can gain. But in this Surya Grahana, in this eclipse, Rahu is more problematic. So just practice the Rahu mantra and Rahu related devatas, Durga, the Divine Mother, and especially somebody is going through a Ravi like a Surya Mahadasha, Mahadasha of Sun and Rahu, and Antardasha, sub-period also will have an effect. Anybody is going through that. So it's definitely, this time of the eclipse will helpful by doing this sadhana of mantras. And it can be some issues relating with problems in the air problems can happen. Any problems in this during that time, travels try to avoid is a good idea. Anything related with the series of accidents can be possibilities are there, air accidents, and a lot of in this Surya Grahana is very powerful, as this year in July is also solar eclipse, and December also solar eclipse. Even though many people have an idea of this, okay, the eclipse is not showing in our area, so it's not going to have an effect. But that is a wrong way of thinking it. Even though, we are all living in Vasudhaika Kutumbakam, in one planet. We are all living in one planet. We are not living in different planets. So definitely have an impact that even though that eclipse is not visible here or visible, definitely you will have an impact on those nakshatras especially, and those rashis. And moreover, the Surya and Chandra, I'm talking about in a broader way, like when we talk about this eclipses, Surya eclipse, solar eclipse and lunar eclipse, sun and moon is for everyone, and everyone who lives in the world and in this universe. So everybody will have an impact, regardless of your nakshatra or rashi. The sadhana supposed to be done to neutralize any effect of it. But again, instead of scaring with this eclipses, putting into yourself into more discipline, sadhana will help. And one thing you need to be very careful, as since it's happening in the Lagna Sandhi, Dhanur Lagna and Makar Lagna, it will be cautious with those Lagnas and take precautions. It will helpful. And I'm not talking about particular chart. In general, it would be better to give proper sadhana during this eclipse time. And during this eclipse time, people might have a difference of opinions also, might create some trouble because of disagreement and agreements. And I think December 2019 is it's very, especially for America, you'll have if you look at it politically also, is a lot of things are moving different direction. So a lot of agreements and disagreements, and this eclipse will have an impact on that too, according to in my view.
Thank you, Pandit Samavedula ji, for that very comprehensive presentation on the December eclipse. Would anyone else on the panel like to touch on the December eclipse? Talk a little bit about it? Sadasiva ji?
Yeah, I'll just pull up the chart here as well. I have it on the 27th, right? At 4 a.m., whatever. US, December 27th, right? Isn't that right? Oh no, I'm sorry. No, it's a 26th. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So it's
26.
Yeah, it's a 26th. I'm sorry. I don't know why I put the moon up there by Saturn. Anyway, but so yeah, a few things that I wanted to say about it is that we have, a couple of things. Again, we want to look at dignity. Saturn. It's happening it's happening in Sagittarius. And the ruler is there, which is really powerful, of course. And anytime the ruler, just like with the eclipse earlier in the year that we talked about, Mercury, or I'm sorry, actually Mercury's not there, excuse me. But with this, with this eclipse, Jupiter is in Sagittarius while it's happening. So anytime the ruler is there, it's going to help to hold together the, potential volatility of the event. Now, as Panditji mentioned, it's it's in Mula Nakshatra, which of course is that goddess Kali, that that energy of nirati and calamity. But you have Mercury, Moon, Sun, and Jupiter all in Mula. So this is like a Mula explosion. I mean, it's like all this energy concentrated in Mula. And again, I talked about Mula earlier. It's where we plant seeds after uprooting something. We can't have a new belief system and a new vision until we pull out the old by the roots. So this quality of uprooting and pulling out by the roots, like pulling out that darkness. If you just trim the top of it, you can't plant anything new. In order to plant seeds, like you have in Mula, which is the seeds, you have to pull the other thing out by the root and create a hole. So it creates a hole. This is what Mula does. It blows something open to create a hole so you can plant those new seeds of hope and inspiration. So this eclipse is all this Mula energy. And so it's going to be very intense in that regard. And Jupiter is there. And Jupiter is very powerful in this nakshatra, of course, because there's nothing better to fill a hole than Guru's grace. And Jupiter is there, so it gets blown open, and the Guru is in his own house. It's like happening in the ashram or in the church or in the place of worship. And the priest is there, right? Brahaspati is there. And so that's what you want. You want to have the change and the transformation and the explosion when you're in the ashram, not when you're out somewhere else. So it's like it's happening in the place of worship. So the message is going to be very accessible. This is what these transits show, that our mind will be aligned with that, with the access point. Because Jupiter had just gone into Sagittarius a month and a half earlier. He goes in Sagittarius on November the 4th. And then a month and a half later, we have this eclipse. The other thing that's noteworthy, Mars has just poked his head into Scorpio. Barely. He's in between two signs. But Mars is in Scorpio, which is also quite powerful to bring about a lot of discipline, right? And so we can be very disciplined at that time. And that's what we should also strive for. But I just wanted to bring out all this Mula energy. And even Saturn Ketu there in Purva Ashada, which is very devotional, ruled by the god Apis, like I said, which is the god of ocean and divine love. And so it could be very devotional time for spiritual devotees and aspirants. It could be quite transformative and powerful. So wanted to bring out that quality of Mula and having the ruler there, and that strength that is underneath it all.
Thank you very much, Sam. I appreciate you pulling the chart up so we can look at how strong of an alignment that is there. And, I think it's very interesting as Jupiter completes its transit through Sagittarius, this eclipse, which is coming, at a big point in that transit. And I think that it kind of suggests that whatever kind of illusion or whatever kind of falseness, there's a lot of question is what's real and what's fake, what's honest, what's dishonest. There's so many questions about this. I think this eclipse is one of those things that puts it all out there, which means if there's any more lies or dishonesty or falseness, the cards are on the table. We're going to be able to see that more, perhaps.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, even about the year in general, all the misdeeds and the injustices and the sense of being out of sync with Dharma, not just spiritual Dharma, but the Dharma of this world, because we're here in this world as well, and we have Dharma and duty to uphold righteousness in this world as well, not just go, oh, the hell with the world, I want liberation. That's not what these spiritual teachers do. They don't just tune out. They get in there and stay involved. That's the real sadhana, is to be engaged and be in the world, but not of the world. And so absolutely, you just hit that right on the head. Like I said earlier, this is going to restore a sense of justice. And right after Jupiter goes in Sagittarius, we have this explosive eclipse. It's like, okay, you thought you saw the truth. The veil is opened up. Maybe we'll get proof that there's aliens. Could be coming, baby. Some aliens, baby. We're going to see them.
Okay, hope it's not like Mars attacks. So
this eclipse is happening right after the Navaratri too, so it's a very powerful Shakti, very powerful feminine energy, also a lot of Shakti there, and the Kali, or you can call Durga, And this Rahu is also involved in this in this eclipse. So definitely, you know, there are a lot of things can happen due to these eclipses, and the best way of dealing with them is getting grounded. As in the beginning, we started with the Jupiter. Year is the Jupiter 2019. So it's better to just bring your all action into more spiritual practices. It will help.
And this axis is, this is one of the reasons, this last thing I'll say, that I think this is the most conducive axis for Rahu Ketu. When we had the Rahu Ketu summit, I talked about it as well. Rahu and Gemini, again, very much about trying to figure out how things work. And Ketu Sagittarius, you know, Ketu doesn't really want anything to do with the world. It's kind of where we can just sort of collapse into a kind of disgust about the world and all. But Sagittarius is very hopeful and optimistic and ruled by Jupiter. And when Ketu's in Sagittarius, it also really gives that focus of Ketu something to really focus on. That's inspiring and that's not despondent and critical and just disgusted. Because that can be a real problem. That's the problem of Ketu, is it's a part of us that's just disgusted with all of it. And so this is why when you get Ketu in the Jupiter-ruled signs, it actually gives that focus of Ketu something that's not just disgusted with the world, but also, you know, sees the purpose and sees the point in being, you know, focused on the right thing. And then, of course, that also puts Rahu in the opposite end in the Mercury sign. So all of that is really, you know, positive and beneficial. So the fact that it's Ketu eclipsing, you know, the sun and Jupiter is there as well is great for the spirituality and for the deeper perceptive awareness that Ketu brings. You know, being able to perceive that which is beyond the world without feeling disgusted and twisted up and just, you know, angry about it all.
I want to, my Western astrological friends, you know, remind me that the galactic center, when planets get conjunct the galactic center, there tends to be a lot of whistleblowing. And so we're going to have Jupiter going over the galactic center in early December before this eclipse. And I know that when Saturn went over the galactic center, we had all these kind of scandals and whistleblowers coming out. And so I'm thinking, you know, it's one of the beautiful things about the galactic center and Mula Nakshatra is that it does strive for truth. And I think, you know, for people who have been, you know, holding back on, you know, bringing out the truth about what's really happening in the world, I think, you know, we could have this huge kind of onslaught of people coming out and saying this is what's really going on with the Federal Reserve and the Vatican and all these things that are kind of up for cleansing, and it might climax just around before the eclipse, and the eclipse will kind of accentuate it.
Fascinating. It's going to be a interesting year, everybody. So anything else on the eclipse before we start to go into some other areas? Okay, my next question is for you, Somya Devi. Somya, would you please discuss some of the 2019 significant Venus transits, specifically touching on conjunction transits of Venus, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and Venus, Ketu, if possible?
Sure. So Venus is, of course, different than the outer planets that we've been talking about, who tend to stay in one sign for a long time, for a year or a couple of years. And they present energy then that we can really see this kind of trend in society because there's a placement going on for a long time. But Venus, on the other hand, is moving through pretty much the entire zodiac each year. So we can see Venus moving through all the signs, and he'll be having conjunctions with each of the other planets throughout this year. So I will touch on some of those. I wanted to point out the planetary wars of Venus, because as he goes and joins with each Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, and Mercury, with each of these, he will have a certain energy to that transit. And then when the two planets are within 1 degree of each other, is when there is a planetary war. I think you had mentioned 4 or 5 degrees earlier, but the way I've learned it is when the two planets are within 1 degree. So for example, the Venus-Jupiter war, we are past that now. That was a couple of days ago when these two are within 1 degree. And so to look out for these, when the two planets are so close together, it's like their energy is competing a bit in the sky, or competing for their expression through us. And so the thing about that is Venus is the brightest planet that we see in the sky. So some people here may have varying opinions. There's some varying opinions, but a lot of people believe that Venus always wins because his magnitude is greater. But at the same time, whenever two planets are at war, both are going to suffer. You know, if there is a war, there is, you know, energy being drained from those planets. So I wanted to point these out. And during these times, people who are ruled by Venus, in particular, the Taurus and Libra rising folks, will want to pay attention to this. You may feel your energy is depleted. You may face some health issues during this time. And then, of course, people also ruled by the other planet in the planetary war. The other thing that is affected is the energy of that planet in general at that time, and the energy around the things that planet rules in your chart. Even if you're not Venus ruled, Venus rules 2 areas of your life, and you may find these 2 areas are suffering or challenged a bit during the Venus wars. So I'm going to point those out as I go through, but I am going to progress through the year a little bit. So we just had the Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Scorpio. Soon, in a few days, Venus is moving into Sagittarius with Saturn. And this will be basically for the month of February. And actually, Venus and Saturn can complement each other in general when they're in the same sign, because Venus is the planet of our desires, of where we indulge in life, where we seek happiness, romance, relationships, good food, good music, all of these sensory pleasures. And these can be great, but they are something that requires a bit of restraint. And so Saturn can help to bring that restraint. At the same time, Venus can complement Saturn, because as Saturn is teaching us about doing hard work and, making commitments and really persevering through something, Venus reminds us a little bit of our humanity, where, we do want to be happy and enjoy life at the same time that we're taking care of all of our responsibilities. So there's a certain balancing energy there. And yet February 17th and 18th is when we will see the planetary war with Venus and Saturn. And then soon after that, on February 24th, Venus will transit into Capricorn, and that's going to be when Ketu is just at 0 degrees. So Venus-Ketu will have an exact conjunction on February 24th. And yeah, let's see if I can put the chart up too. So Venus and Ketu then will be there until Ketu moves into Sagittarius. Then, of course, Venus is traveling through Aquarius and then Pisces, where he is exalted. Now, for the second half of this Venus and Pisces transit, Jupiter will be in Scorpio and aspecting onto Venus here in May for really only a few days. But that's a time where we could really harness that energy of Venus exalted and turn our desires towards a higher power, towards something higher, really aligning them with our higher purpose rather than just our own personal pleasure, as Venus can tend to make us seek. Now, as Venus moves along, he is going to be joining Rahu during both eclipses in July this summer. So during that time, and I didn't really dive into the Venus-Ketu exact conjunction, but both when Venus is joining with Ketu and when Venus is joining with Rahu, we may see aggravation in the areas of our lives ruled by Venus. And also, again, the nodes can help us to start to see our blind spots with certain things. And so in relationships in particular. When Venus is with Ketu back in February, we may feel a real turning away from our relationships, really looking at being very critical over them, being very critical over our own desires in general. Now, again, for the people practicing sadhana and really working on self-improvement, this may be a time where we can let go of some of our unhealthy desires or detach from some desires that we realize actually aren't making us happy. Later on, where we're looking at now, when Venus is with Rahu during these eclipses, that's another opportunity to really see how we are working with desires, how we're working with relationships in ways that are not helping us, that are not serving us. At the same time, there can be a lot of confusion when Venus is joining the nodes. The nodes can always bring up confusion. So that is something to watch for then. Now, as we move along in the second half of the year, Venus is going to be pretty much totally combust for most of August, really close to the sun. So he's going to be within 3 degrees of the sun from August 3rd through 25th. That's pretty combust, but even from like mid-July to mid-September, he's going to be close enough to the sun that we may be feeling this. So when Venus is so close to the sun in this combust state, we may really feel like we're not getting what we want. So again, it's going to be an opportunity to work with how we approach desire around the eclipses, because we really may feel frustrated with it later on in the summer when Venus is combust for 1 to 2 months. We may feel like we're not able to achieve the harmony or the compromise in our relationships, like things just are not there. This could be especially frustrating as we move on in August and late August and September when Venus is in Leo and combust. Because when Venus is in Leo, we're already really feeling like we should be getting what we want. Like what we want is the most important, and so that could be particularly frustrating during that period. And you know, as we move on through the year, we're going to see Venus come all the way back around, and there's actually going to be a second conjunction with Ketu in early December. So once again with this, Ketu could really help us go into the depths of the shadows that we hold in our own patterns, seeking happiness, seeking harmony in relationship, relating with our sensory desires. We may find, again, that the things that we think are making us happy just aren't at this time, and there can be a turning away from them, but also a lot of evolution if we're really doing the work around that. So a couple more of the planetary wars, just to touch on that. The second Venus-Jupiter war, that's going to be at the end of November. Venus-Mars, these two will be at war in mid-August, and they're actually both totally combust at that time. So they're really already suffering because of that. And that's going to be the biggest challenge during that time. And then, of course, Venus-Mercury, they're going to meet up near the end of July, and then again in mid-September. For the planetary wars are just a few days each, usually like 2 to 4 days when they're within 1 degree there. And I'm not going to do all the dates on that, but I put those out on my blog as we go through the year.
Somya, I can't thank you enough for taking this topic on. You know, we talked a lot about these slower moving grahas, but it was amazing the way you took us through the whole year with Venus and touching on how these quicker moving grahas can affect us and focusing in on some of the planetary wars. Very grateful that you took on this Venus transit. So thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on some of Venus's wars, transits as we go through 2019? Want to discuss Venus? Sadasivaji?
Sure. Just to also, Somya, excellent job with that. I wanted to just show this again, because I was looking at it as Somya was also describing it, and especially in the summer with Venus, as Somya just said, Venus, Sun, Mars, and the combustion, and then the exact conjunction happening in Leo. Just to go through it, you could see Venus and the Sun here about 2 degrees separated on August 6th. Now, when Venus is combust and direct, it's on the other end, on the other side of the Sun. So when Venus is combust in retrograde, it's still combust, but it's between the Sun and the Earth. So its combustion is not so severe because it's very close to the Earth. But in this example, it's on the other side of the Sun. So Venus is as far away from the Sun as it can be when it's combust and retrograde. I'm sorry, when it's combust and direct. So that's what we have here. And you can see on August 6th, it's about as far away as it can go. I'll just run this forward each day. You'll see Mars move here, and then Venus and the Sun join almost exact, and then Venus catch up to Mars in Leo. So if I go forward, you see 19, 20. Mars is now in Leo. Venus and the Sun are 23. They're in 1 degree. Venus and the Sun tracks almost exact. From our point of view, they move almost exactly the same speed. That's why Venus doesn't go retrograde nearly as much as other planets, because it moves almost exactly the same speed from our point of view as the Sun. But anyway, so you see now they're both at 26, 27.44, 27.56. They're still, like, stay within like 1 degree. Then we get here, and now you start seeing Venus and Mars get exact. And then here, like around August 20th, they're like almost exact, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. They're like within 1 degree right around here, around the end of August, like Somya said. I just think it's interesting to see it. And so to see it like that, and to see that, and to just sort of track it like that. The other thing about Mars Venus that I'll just also add is there's also often a lot of libido and passion and sensuality when Mars and Venus come together. So it has that explosive potential, and it's also a strong potential for a lot of like sexuality, and that can be something, if you share that with your partner, that kind of shut up and kind of get physical a little bit, just to put it sort of bluntly like that. There's a lot of, sometimes we just talk too much, or you don't respect me, or this or that. It's like, oh, come on, let's just be animals. You know, Leo is a wild animal Rashi. It's called the wild animal more than anything. And that's kind of what, when Venus is in Leo, it's very passionate. It's a very passionate placement. When Mars is there, it's also very passionate. And when I see these kinds of conjunctions, Mars, Venus, or any 2 planets, I look to see which one is really kind of getting the better of it, like which one is in a more friendly element. Mars is definitely in a friendlier element here. It's also with the Sun, so it's a lot of fire. Venus is not really feeling that kind of support, so there can be that kind of, as Somya said, like, I'm not being appreciated and getting really frustrated. But if you can, like if you're in a relationship, easiest way to kind of flip the script when you get something like this is just shut up and kind of keep it light and fun and gregarious and physical. I'll just say that. So the combination of try to manage your desires and kind of express them physically a little bit and get some of that heat out of your system might be a good way to proceed, but we'll just keep it there. Venus is also moving toward debilitation, so try to enjoy it for a while. So just leave it at that.
Yeah, that combust Venus is hot and heavy. So
it's combust and with Mars. It's not just combust, it's with Mars, who's also combust. So it's a lot of combustion, and Venus is not getting the better of it there. But that's definitely something that will happen. And if you have that good thing, sometimes that's what you got, and you can get that heat out, you know.
Sounds like a good time for tantric practices.
Tantric, that's her.
Okay, so does anyone else like to comment on the Venus transit throughout the year?
Yeah, I just want to point out one thing. One of the things that I learned from Sanjay Rath's tradition is that combust planets kind of sometimes destroy the karka values. That's why, you know, if when you're ruled by Venus and it goes combust, you may feel tired, but create a lot of deep spiritual energy. And the Sun, you know, representing the divine, you know, when it combusts planets, it can create a lot of chance for spiritual growth. And then when it's one of the things that it's taken me a long time for me to understand is that when a planet is totally combust, like within sometimes maybe 1 degree, sometimes 40 minutes, you know, medieval astrology used to call it Kazame, and Kazame planets actually are extremely powerful. I've watched it in transit, and you know, when my Atmakaraka Saturn is totally conjunct the Sun, it's actually an extremely spiritual experience. Oprah Winfrey has Sun conjunct Venus, and you know, she has that kind of incredible magnetism from that, and it's actually extremely powerful. It's not, if you looked at her chart and you said, oh, she's got this combust Venus, you'd say, oh, you're never going to go anywhere with your career and your glamour and stuff like that. But the opposite is true, because the Sun is totally energizing when it's that close. Like, people come to me and they say, oh, my Venus is totally combust. I said, well, that's wonderful. Like, you know, sometimes 1 degree or half a degree, it's extremely powerful because you're getting all that incredible energy from the Sun.
So excellent. So well put. Thank you, Barry. Any other discussions about Venus, Shukra? So I have, for the last question, put together a little remedial technique that I would like to share with everyone to apply during both beneficial and difficult transits. But I would first like to say that with a little joke, and that's that one of my teachers, Dr. Vasant Lad, he used to joke that astrologers have what is called Jyotish Unmad. This is a type of mental illness or mental disorder where we think about Jyotish all the time. And whenever we understand anything that is going to be happening in the world, we're going to understand it from a perspective of Jyotish. This doesn't just mean astrologers, but also real hobbyists, real enthusiasts of Jyotish. They have this way that they perceive universe through the lens of Jyotish. So just with that in mind, this is a simple technique. All of you can take it home. It's not to always pull the Prashna for the moment when you're making every decision, because Dr. Lad would say that's Jyotish Unmad. I don't encourage you to always check the chart with every single decision which you are making. But maybe perhaps with the bigger decisions, you can take a look at the Prashna to make sure, is this difficult transit going to be influencing this decision in a bad way? Or is this beneficial transit might be helping to benefit this decision in a good way? So I'm just going to share my screen for a moment. So as I mentioned, one which emphasizes the reduction of harmful aspects, and the other which supports the benefits of a positive transit. Very simple technique. This is a Prashna-based technique for malefic, so you can apply it during an eclipse. You can apply it during Saturn returns, Sati Sati, nodal returns, planetary wars, afflicted moon. These are just a few of the difficult transits you can apply the technique. Now, the general approach during most really intense transits suggests reflective practices and spiritual or sadhana-based practices. So always sadhana-based practices and reflective practices are the best remedies of all. Spiritual, religious practices. However, sometimes the responsibilities of our lives suggest we must exist, work, and produce and create and be active during difficult transits, such as eclipses. Maybe we have to work on eclipse. Maybe we have a regular 9-to-5 job and we have to work on the eclipse. So, you know, things to consider about having to function no matter how difficult the transit is. And other transits such as Saturn, Rahu, Ketu are very long-lasting transits, and we have to try to be happy and prosper during these difficult transits as well. So maybe how can we limit the potential danger is what we're considering. So after pulling a Prashna chart of the current moment, here and now, locate malefic aspect, this difficult transit, and determine exact position. This is house, sign, nakshatra, and pada. If the malefic aspect is in a Kendra or trine position, take note of which house or houses is afflicted. Again, so if there is eclipse, it is in Kendra or trine. Take note of which house is being affected by the eclipse. Even consider the aspect. If the afflicted house in the Prashna chart is also considered afflicted in the birth chart, then no actions are to be taken. It is indicative of potential danger. So if you're pulling the transit on the chart right now and there is an eclipse in the 4th house, and you also have very afflicted 4th house, you should probably not go driving a car. This would be a very dangerous decision. This is something that you want to limit that action because of not only the transit, but the malefic aspect in your chart. So if the afflicted houses in the Prashna are benefic within the birth chart, so even though the eclipse is in the 4th house, you should probably not go driving cars no matter what. But let's say you have a very benefic exalted Jupiter in the 4th, or a very benefic exalted moon in the 4th. Then it's okay maybe that even though this eclipse is dangerous for that, your chart kind of protects you over that. Your chart kind of remedies you over that. So you don't have to be as protective if your chart kind of protects you from what's happening in the transit. So for example, if the Prashna chart shows an eclipse transiting the 4th house, and the birth chart shows Mars and Ketu in Cancer in the 4th house, this would be indicative of extreme danger for the native, such as like a car accident, and no action should be taken. So if there's a difficult energy in the transit in the 4th, like an eclipse, and also in the birth chart, they should really not take any actions in that area. And you can just look at the Prashna to see this, but we're talking about mainly in this malefic aspect when it's in a Kendra or a trine position. So this is another malefic aspect. If the malefic aspect or transit is in a Dusthana position in one of the 6th, 8th, or 12th house, then generally I encourage no action to be taken there. It can be very difficult when the difficult transit is in Dusthana houses. It might show significations in the birth chart that have some positive quality, but in the transit it can be very difficult. In the transit it can be very dangerous. A lot of difficult events happen during these times, or sometimes events which are fatal or chaotic. So the only exception I have for this is Viparita Yoga. If someone has Viparita Yoga in their natal chart, then maybe some actions can be taken, even if there's a difficult transit in the 6th, 8th, or 12th house. Again, this technique is just considering the Prashna with our actions, especially when there is an eclipse or a difficult planetary war, considering that Prashna in our actions. So right now I have here just a Prashna that I pulled. It's for later in June 9th. It's part of that really intense period that we're talking about. And as you can see, there are some difficult aspects of the Prashna. So it's never black and white. So it's not always an easy example, but there's an evaluation which goes on. So as you can see, as far as Kendra or trines which are affected, the 4th house and the 10th house are severely afflicted here. One with Ketu and Saturn, and the other with Rahu and Mars in the 10th house. Now, Mercury, we talked about being a little angel, which is a saving grace here. But this means you have to be careful if you pull this chart and you're going and about to go take some long distance travel. Maybe you're about to go take a long car ride. Maybe this isn't the best Prashna for that, but you have to consider your birth chart as well. Now over here, I have the great Bambino, Babe Ruth. This birth time is just something that is kind of, I found it, his birth time is questionable. It's partially rectified, and I like using this birth time for the babe. So when we're looking at this chart, he has some favorable positions in his chart, such as he has a strong Venus-Mercury conjunction in Aquarius in the 10th house. That's a very powerful position in the babe's chart. But in the conjunction of the Prashna, there's Rahu being there. So let's say the babe had a big decision to make about signing a contract with the new team, and he pulls this challenging Prashna up. So the Mercury aspect is kind of pulling things together here. But in general, so he could be able to evaluate it. But Rahu is an element. And this Rahu element might be something which is he's being deceived. Maybe he's being misled. Maybe there's a little thing in the contract which is inappropriate. But it's just showing to apply the Prashna to your individual birth chart. And don't consider the Prashna for every decision you're making, but maybe some of the bigger decisions, take a look at the Prashna and how it relates to the chart, what afflicted houses. Here's another good example. he has Viparita Yoga. The ruler of Babe Ruth's 12th house is in the 12th house. Mars is in the 12th house in Aries. So he has this very powerful position of Mars here. So even though the moon is a challenging transit in the Prashna right now, he has that Viparita Yoga. Maybe he doesn't have to consider that as much. So this is just something that we take into the evaluation, and it's just a simple technique. I want anyone who's watching this should be able to try it at home. Now, the benefic aspect is how to use an auspicious transit for our benefit. This might include a benefic moon. Everyone likes Jupiter transits which are high dignity and functionally benefic, or aspects of your chart which are in high dignity or functionally benefic, favorable conjunctions. These are all times to use this other Prashna technique. Now, we'll start with the Dusthana houses. If the benefic aspects, the favorable aspect which you want to activate, is in a Dusthana house, generally its energy is limited, and so that energy will be afflicted. The transit is less favorable, and it is indicative of potential danger, loss, and health challenges. So whenever you want to use a favorable transit, unless you have Viparita Yoga in your chart, don't look for that favorable transit in Dusthana position. Wait for it to be in Kendra position before you perform the action. So if the Prashna chart shows full moon in Rohini transiting the 8th house, this could be indicative of potential danger. Even favorable transits over the 8th and 12th house must be noticed. We should do sadhana, spiritual practices. So after pulling the Prashna chart for this exact moment, determine the benefic aspect, house, sign, nakshatra, and pada. If the benefic aspect is in Kendra or trine position, take note of which house is activated. Energies related to the activated house in the Prashna chart become more auspicious for the individual. So if you have this very auspicious transit showing up in the 10th house of the Prashna, it could be very positive in that area. If positively affected house in Prashna is also, let's say, functionally benefic and strong in the divisional 1 chart, it could be indicative of incredible rewards. Even if positively activated charts in the Prashna are found to be malefic in the birth chart. So we're talking about the Prashna is really good for the 10th house, but the person's chart, their natal chart 10th house, is afflicted. It may be a good opportunity for the native to experience rewards or positive energy where they normally would not. So normally someone who has difficult karma there, this positive transit bringing energy to the transit there could show potential opportunity for them. So if Jupiter is in Cancer transiting the 9th house, that's a very favorable time to take action concerning higher education, the guru, and religious or devotional practices. Even if the native has a heavily afflicted 9th house in their natal chart, it's still a good time to improve their karma because of that Jupiter shining that aspect on that 9th house. So this is just another example of how to use the auspicious Prashna, maybe work with it a little bit. You have May 9th, 2017. I like this chart when Venus was exalted. And this is in its ascendant position. Sun was also very strong during that time. Now, there are difficult aspects of this Prashna, but we're focusing on the Venus being the best, positive aspect. Now, on the right side, we have Yogananda's birth chart. His Lagna is very powerful. He also has the ruler, he has Viparita Yoga. The ruler of his 8th house is in the 8th house, conjunction with Mars. So, of course, now, this is a whole other philosophical question, but some believe Yogananda was a Sadguru. So in many ways, he transcended his chart. So it's possible some of these chart aspects, not only is he manifesting the highest possible level of them, but he's transcended past them. But this is another philosophical point which I don't want to get too much into. Now, this other aspect here showing that in general, this Prashna for Yogananda, a good Lagna in the Prashna is a good time for Yogananda to take any dharmic actions, especially associated with the moon. And the moon is in the 8th house in the Prashna. That's a difficult position. We talked about moon in Dusthana house. Be careful with that action. But then he has Viparit Yoga. So he has this powerful to transcend any kind of difficult energy there towards a more auspicious positive energy. So this is just an example of how we kind of use the Prashna along with our chart to kind of magnify our decisions. You know, in the Prashna here, the Saturn was in the 10th house. So if he was going to be releasing his book, he probably wouldn't want to consider this retrograde Saturn position on the 10th house when he made that final decision. So these are just some of the things we consider in using a Prashna when evaluating difficult transits and benefic transits. And it's just a simple remedy. And I hope everyone enjoyed that. And thank you for giving me the time. And I would love to hear any other remedies from the panel, any techniques as far as getting, using a beneficial transit or reducing the malefic transit. I know Pundit Samavedula has told us many remedies, but any other remedies which anyone from the panel would like to share would be deeply appreciated. Barry?
So one of the things that I always, the mind tends to kind of cling to the negative and kind of exaggerate it. And I always have my students from my blogs and they're always kind of worried about every last transit. And so one of the things that you have to remember is that, most of the time transits are kind of just bumps. It depends on the dasha that you're in, because transits are 20% and dashas are 80%. So when you have a direct hit, it's like, I'll give you an example. Like I was running a Mars Mercury period, and which is something that is kind of a karaka for accidents. And we had a Mars Mercury conjunction happening in a planetary war on a Wednesday, which is, I'm Scorpio rising, so Mars is not really a great, Mercury is a so I knew not to drive that day. And I was sitting in my office, and my wife came in and said, "Is your car in the driveway?" And she didn't hear me, and so she backed out fully into my car at 20 miles an hour, which no one ever does. And she just so she damaged both of our cars. So the prediction was absolutely right. Luckily there was karma shift and I wasn't hurt, and she wasn't hurt. We had $2,500 in damage. But the point is, it's like major events happen when you have a confluence of the dasha and the transit happening at the same time. The transits of the Ascendant Lord are going to be very key. The transits of the Dasha Lord are going to be key. But usually to get a really direct hit, you've got to have it hitting your natal chart in the right place. You've got to have, and most people fear all the things that we talk about. And you have to remember that most of the time God's taking care of us, and most of the stuff we fear doesn't happen. So there are times to be cautious. If you see like a direct hit, like I gave the example of. But many times, you just, it's a little bump, and you just have to know it's a little bump. You do your sadhana and you're fine. So to me, that's the awareness is that God's taking care of you. And if you, once in a while, 2 or 3 times in your lifetime, maybe there's a catastrophe and you can see it in the chart, but for the most part, you're taken care of. And, just remember that.
Amen. Amen to that. So anyone else like to share any remedial techniques or what they like to do as far as their practice during difficult transits such as eclipses?
I'll just say real quick, in general, it always happens where, as astrologers, when we do readings, we're always asked, what do I do about it? What do I do about it? And again, there's always these acute interventions that we can look at, but it's redundant, but it's also the most important and truthful thing is to do sadhana. And sadhana means every day. If it's not every day, it's not sadhana. It's sort of a hit or miss thing. The reason you do spiritual practice every day is because it builds up a muscle, just like you brush your teeth every day, you eat every day, you do other things every day that gives you a buffer against the bad stuff that can happen or whatever you want to say. When you live your life that way, then, as you're looking at any astrological situation, you just see it as an opportunity. And that's not just a slogan. Every hit through aspect or whatever is always potential. All of the planets are potential. And that means benefic potential. None of them are bad. There's nothing bad happening anywhere, ever. Again, it might sound like that's just a sort of cheerleading, but it's not. When, you know, I'll be a little autobiographical. I have all these planets in Gemini. I'm about to get hit. All that stuff in Gemini and eclipses. I got like most of my chart there. And I'm like, I can already feel the power coming. I'm not afraid of it at all. Rahu going through the first, eclipsing all that Mars stuff. I got all these planets there. But I know what happens. The last time that happened, that's when my whole life and career took off. Was it transformative and upside down and blowing everything up? Yeah. And I was like, woohoo! Right? And again, so it's because I have spiritual practice. I do it. And if I wasn't doing it, I would be just triggered and jumping out of my skin. So that's what lands everything, and not just in that anecdote, but any other, and in fact, every situation. So we should be aware of it, and I'm always aware of where things are. I got all those planets now going through my 7th house, all that Sagittarius, Saturn, been there back and forth, Saturn, Ketu, all of that. So we're all doing this. I had Saturn go over my moon a few years ago. Both parents died, just like you would expect for Sati, the whole thing. When Saturn Rahu joined in Libra, right on my moon back several years ago. I knew all that was coming, and it was also very intense. And it was also in a time of enormous growth where I started my school and did all this other stuff. It was just full on. So the thing to understand when you get these, what look like vicious transits that you might be afraid of, this is when the power comes. That's what the planets are. They're powerful, especially the slow-moving, grinding ones where Saturn's going to grind over your moon or your ascendant or something else. We're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is you're going to get the power for that amount of time. And if you're just triggered and thinking your whole life is out here, then it's just going to bury you. This is why you do sadhana, because when you do sadhana, you still get the intensity, but you get the wisdom. You get the direct hits of one planet on something else. And that doesn't happen very often. And when it happens, you should be alert to it. Any direct hit by transit, of course, when it lines up with dashas, that's something else, goes to a deeper level. But as these things are happening, that's when you're getting the juice directly. It's like Saturn coming and going, bam, now you're getting me. And there's nowhere to run, right? Now, of course, you want to look at things that could be dangerous and whatnot and know all that's going on if you can read it astrologically, but to fear it and all that stuff, that's just a form of ignorance. And so this is what sadhana is. It's that resilience and the ability and capacity to handle all of that power, because that's what it is. It's all power and it's all benefic. All of it. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, through the power of the great guru, may we all transcend our fears.
Yeah, and be able to sit with that and ride that big wave. You know, I've been using the surfer analogy the last few years. You know, when you're surfing, like you might see this huge wave and it might scare you. Like, I don't know if I could surf that wave. That's pretty dangerous. But if you can get up on that wave, man, you're going to go fast and farther than you would go otherwise. You can stay on the little waves. Oh, I can handle this much karma. I can handle this much intensity. I can handle this much transformation. That's just a little outside my comfort zone. But if that big wave is coming, and the big wave, like this coming year, the big wave's coming for me. When you see the big wave is coming, you don't have any choice. It's coming. So you get ready for the big wave. And if you're ready for the big wave, then you can get on the board and get steady. And then the big wave comes and then you're on it. You're like, woo. If not, you see the big wave coming and you're like, oh.
Cowabunga.
Cowabunga, that's awesome.
Yeah, ride that wave. And I think, you
got no choice. It's coming. The big waves are coming. All the waves we can see and fear, they're coming. So let's get ready to ride them. And that's what sadhana is. That's the great thing. Go ahead. Yeah.
So anyone here on the panel, just anything they'd like to share to our community in the light of our discussion of this year's transit and our, just our journey together?
I just want to second Sam. That was really brilliant and inspirational. It's really those kind of difficult moments that we look back in our life and we realize if we hadn't gone through that divorce or that hospitalization or something, we wouldn't be the better person that we are. And we all kind of fear these huge changes coming, but the nature of life is that it changes. Everything is always changing. And the only way we grow is by accepting change and, like Sam said, riding the wave. So use the transits, when you do get big transformational moments, use that time to ride it. And it's never easy. I look back at my life, and I was in the hospital with kidney stones for 9 months, and it forced me to study alternative medicine and help people with healing. It was the most difficult part of my life, but if I hadn't experienced it, I wouldn't be the person I am. So always understand that these even when you get these difficult transformational moments, you'll look back and say, God, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be that person. Very powerful.
Well, I just want to thank everyone.
Yeah, and I'll just say one more thing here, is that we're all very conditioned by our chart, and how we can bring this back to our natal chart is you can see if someone is really used to, like someone who has like Saturn in the ascendant or Saturn on the moon or this kind of thing, or, like Rahu and, the nodes, really prominent or what have you. We're conditioned to be able to accept and expect and endure certain kinds of stress. Like someone who has very prominent Mars, like maybe Mars Rahu, then when that Mars Rahu or that kind of thing comes up, they're more used to it. So also notice this with your clients. Someone, if you're seeing they're going to have a heavy Saturn transit, but they already have a heavy Saturn, they're going to be used to it. So you also have to modify this, and for like your clients, it's going to be something that they're used to, right? And so I say this just for people who are reading charts. Be careful not to pathologize and get too worked up about when a client might be dealing with a difficult transit. Especially something like Saturn or one of the nodes, which can be, we tend to go, oh my God. Maybe the person is very used to that and they can ride that edge very easily because it's part of their nature and it's very prominent. So I just wanted to add that last thing.
100%. There, I think as we all, in the new age of where Jyotish is becoming so widely recognized and people are appreciating it from all different cultures, all different religions, that we remove the fear out of it, that we remove the fear and the planets are something to be feared, that God is something to be feared. It's something to be honored. It's something to be respected. It's something to be devoted to, but it's not something to be afraid of.
Right.
Okay, well, I just want to thank everyone for coming here. Somya Devi, Pandit Samavedula, Barry Rosen, Sadasiva Ji. Thank you, all of us who attended this 2019 Jyotish Transit Summit live. There's a March summit.
Thank you, Ksanati, for putting it on. Ksanati, thank you. I have to thank you too, Ksanati, for putting this on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
It's my honor and pleasure, and I look forward to many more. This is the start of many more exciting discussions to come, and it's nice to share this satsang with all of you in this community. I guess as an Aquarius ascendant, nothing makes me happier. So blessed to be with all of you, and may the Guru guide and protect. Om Namah Shivaya.
Namah Shivaya.
Jaya.
Jai Gurudev, everybody.
Jai Gurudev.
Retreat to the big mind.